Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. This is a video I'm starting Wednesday, December 4th. It won't be up till probably Friday, maybe Saturday, probably Friday. And I'm making maybe shorter videos I'm going to put up every day, maybe a day and a half apart, things like that. I might put some videos up on my other channel too. We'll see how it all goes we race to the end of the year here. I was going to do an introduction. I might do one later or something in the middle, a late introduction. But I want to start off here. I got something on Pete Hegseth, and this thing was SNL. So here's, it just speaks for itself. Now let's go back a second here. No, again, I messed it up here. There you go.
RFK Jr., Bobby.
Okay, so they got Alec Baldwin as RFK Jr. He's getting a big round of applause. For whatever reason, Lorne Michaels loves Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin, he's been mildly funny on some of these shows at Saturday Night Live. He has a couple good sketches, most of them not. He's horrible at impersonation, and he was on that 30 Rock show that was, a 2-star show, right? Like a 1 or a 2-star show, right? And, he wasn't great on that show. Tina Fey, who wrote that show, she wanted Alec Baldwin to do that role of her boss on the show, and she wasn't going to do it if he didn't do it. But they love him over there at NBC and SNL. And so he went through a hard time. His Trump impression sucked, and, he was horrible at it. And, at some point I discovered his Instagram page, and I realized the mannerisms he does these ducky lips. He used to do these ducky lips when he did his Trump impersonation on SNL, and it sucked. The ducky lips were an exaggeration of his own mannerisms, and I realized he was very much the things that he doesn't like about Trump are qualities that he himself possesses, the same exact personality type. And so that's when I set in on the guy because, he was just this hypocrite. And then, of course, the story broke about his wife and the faking an accent, really being from Massachusetts. I made the joke about her being from Boston, Spain. And then, of course, he shot a coworker. But all these things paled in comparison to the hypocrisy of him getting on Instagram and blasting Trump for, a number of years, 3-4 years. And when he himself possessed the same qualities that that he hated in Trump, right? And so he became a target of well, let's get into this thing first. I'm going to show you the memes in a bit. But I made so many videos about him for that reason, right? And he sucks at these, they keep on shoving him out there, and he's not funny. He sucks. And now he's going to try to do RFK Jr.
Hey, I don't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to tell you again, I'm so honored to be the head of the Health and Human Services.
Okay, so that's a horrible impression. It's one of the worst impressions that I've heard. RFK Jr. has a very distinctive voice that's hard to impersonate because he has a medical condition. Like his voice is like that because it's a medical condition. So in a sense, it's a disability, right? RFK Jr.'s voice is due to whatever he explained this in various places, but he has some kind of issue with his voice based in a medical, liability, a medical condition, which makes him like a handicapped person. And you're making fun of his voice when it's something that, it's like making fun of a handicapped person, right? It's like stuff that he blasted Trump for when Trump mimicked that handicapped person, but it's basically the same thing. And he sucks at it. It's bad. He's got the cadence all wrong. He's just, but it's RFK Jr. It's not an impression, right? Like, let's go back. That's not a fucking impression.
And I'm so honored to be the
I'm so honored. Like, anybody can do that. That's not
head of the Health and Human Services. Department Americans need someone to teach them how to be healthy, someone like me. A 70-year-old man with movie star looks and a worm in his brain.
Okay, so again, just silly. If he had a worm in his brain, that would be whatever it is, but he's still better than Alec Baldwin. It's better than having a bullet in your brain. At least he didn't shoot somebody, you fuck. Right, you shot somebody. I mean, whatever you want to excuse yourself, then you whined about it. You threw various people under the bus. You fake cried in that interview. You were an absolute disgrace. I have I have more memes of Alec Baldwin than anybody. And so I've just collected these memes over the year. Let's roll him, this piece of shit, right? And so, as bad as RFK Jr. is on Israel, and as bad as he is in terms of his cheating on his wife 35 times in 1 year and documenting in a diary which she found and her killing herself. I mean, RFK Jr. himself has said that if all the skeletons in his closet voted, he'd be president of the world, right? Like he even admitted to how many skeletons he has. RFK Jr. is still a much better person than this piece of shit. Let's roll the memes here.
You tell them that we are horrible, desperate, ghoulish creatures.
Hello, Mr. Baldwin.
You're in my way.
Sorry, sir.
Out of my way.
Sorry. Out of his way. No, it's the other car, Alec.
I figured men do it. Why can't I do it too? There's so much collaboration. There's so much sisterhood right now. And yeah, I would say hopefully we're done. But Alec still has to go and do his part.
Boom, snip. You got to de-nut him. You got to de-nut Alec. This is great. Watch this. He's got to do his part.
Say hopefully we're done. But Alec still has to go and do his part.
Look at her look at her face when she makes this scissors. She wants to de-nut this guy. I mean, she's been a disaster for Alec, right?
Consider the source.
Oh, she's a white girl? Yes, I am a white girl. I am a white girl.
So, for example, my wife's on the phone with her hairdresser or her friend. She's like, really? Okay, I can't wait to see you. That's going to be great. Fantastic. What time? 12 o'clock? My wife is from Spain. Mm-hmm. And she said, blah, blah, blah.
We have very few ingredients. We have tomatoes. We have, how do you say it? Cucumbers. We have red pepper. We have, of course. It's not easy. And I think part of it is that I'm in shape before I have a baby. And then I stay active when I'm pregnant. And I'm not trying to stay thin. I'm just trying to keep my circulation going and stretching and keep my muscle tone up. And then we're having a baby. It was a surprise, a wonderful surprise.
And one time at band camp.
It was a surprise, a wonderful surprise.
And one time at band camp.
It was a surprise, a wonderful surprise.
Well, there was a scream I heard, which is the scream that's normally reserved if there's a spider in the house on Long Island. I'm not exaggerating.
So the first part of the book is philosophy on how to live very namaste. I have 3 little babies. I live kind of a crazy life between work and them and everything else. So it's just, how to stay calm and centered and deal with things that are coming at you. Then we can talk about food.
I'm going to kick your culo.
It's gonna kick my culo.
I'm going to kick your culo.
It's gonna kick my culo.
Honey. Honey, this is Governor Christie's fleece. This is the fleece that everyone's been looking for. Did you steal the governor's fleece?
I cannot tell a lie. I stole it. I'm his biggest fan.
I admire Governor Christie, too. New Jersey State Police.
Consider the source.
Oh, she's a white girl? Yes, I am a white girl. I am a white girl.
I don't wake up and look in the mirror and go, oh, there he is. Ooh, you.
Leonela! Basta! Los palitas, basta! Las palitas, suficiente!
Ay, ay, ay.
See. Itana idama ben. Itana! Itana, come. Dama! Itana! Itana! No! Come! Itana, come! Itana, hush! I'm being upstaged by a dog. That's where my career is at right now. Itanta! Come!
Ay, ay, ay.
See? It's been a little weird. Well, here we go. Oh, good girls. Hitanta, come and sit, baby. Hitana, come. Hitana, come. That's my cue. Shh. Sit. Come here. I'm coming.
It's hilarious. He'd be talking to his dogs in a Spanish accent. Like, that's how effed up things, right? Alec, your bitch doesn't speak Spanish. I mean the dogs.
Trump is alone. Trump is an anomaly. Trump is a maniac.
We some island boys doing cameo with the island's a perv. Alec Baldwin shot his coworker, and his wife thinks she's Spanish. And we're on Cameo. I'm going to pick that up. And Cameo, we're island boys, and let the island boys.
Message to say how sorry I was and shooting famous cinematographer. And then the gunshot, as you all know, the cinematography. I want to apologize. I'm sorry that Vladimir Putin has effed with me again. Click with, I don't know what words to use today, but if they click with them. Isn't marriage a gunfight sometimes? I'd light up a couple usually when I was working, because I'm so nervous when I'm shooting to get the job done. When I was shooting, or just stupid behavior. When I'm shooting.
Well, we're having a baby. How about that for a project?
Ay, ay, ay.
Cravings here. Okay.
See.
Ay, ay, ay.
See.
Ay, ay, ay.
See. The woman who's their neighbor, she found this. I can't. She found the Splenda packet.
This is such a great meme. So this is, right in the beginning of the Helena Hutchinson thing, when he was being trashed by everyone on the media. And everything was going south on him. And someone wrote him a nice bunch of notes on a Splenda packet, and he lost it. And his neighbor found it and brought it to his house. So then he took a trip to London for some reason. And this is where he really looked like the character Calibus that I was talking about. So let's, anyways, it's self-explanatory. This is when he used to post a lot of videos. But Alec has now put out 2 videos in the last couple of days. He's looking rough. Like, look at him right here, right? I mean, those like, it looks kind of like Calibus. Calibus, is that what it is? Calibus from Clash of the Titans, right? Like, he's got some Calibus stuff working there. And so, all right, let's take a look at his videos here.
I'm going to go ahead and record this because I think it's funny.
I bet it's going to be hilarious.
I get to the airport. I fly on a sleeper flight. And I get to the airport. And I get through the immigration. And
Wait, are you at the airport? I'm not clear on that point. Are you in the airport? Because it's not. You haven't made that clear yet. Looking Calibus like, huh?
Get my bags, and I'm heading to the car that's going to drive me to where I'm going. And the driver says, yeah, we're going to go to the car park. And I'll do my bad accent.
It was horrible. Almost as bad as your Trump impression.
Fake.
Care deeply about a woman's right to choose to give her child polio.
Okay, again, mischaracterization. This is hammering anti-vaxxers. And, there's a lot more information about this that this just sucks, right? I mean, it's a horrible impression. First of all, you have to have some sort of standard and control, quality control. And this is supposed to be one of the premier comedy shows. And it's gone downhill. Like, I don't think it was ever as great as I thought it was, when in its heyday. But during that period of time, it was great. Now, looking back at it, it's not as great as I thought, right? The sketches aren't as funny. There's still some good sketches and things they did over the years. Now the thing sucks. And for their standards of the level of sucking that Saturday Night Live is right now, this is way worse. Like, this is their cold open. And this is, they're rolling Alec Baldwin out because, he's just been redeemed. He's, these, I guess the whole thing with his trial, that's all gone. He's not going to be charged or whatever he's going to be. I mean, the whole thing's, that thing's a mess, the shooting. And now he's like, he's had his period of banishment, and they're bringing him back into the fold. And they're rolling out this horrible impression, and it sucks in terms of just comedy and his impression of Kennedy. And it sucks even more in terms of what he's saying. Like, just an absolute piece of shit. And, the show just sucks so bad.
I just wish people would take my appointment more seriously. All right, I gotta go. I got a dead dolphin in my car.
Again, the dead bear thing. So, I talked about roadkill before and all these things. But for Kennedy to be harvesting meat, there's a dead bear cub, which sucks, right? And if he's going to use the fur, well, then it's not going to waste, right? And if he skins it and uses the fur, first of all, having the ability to do that, it's just not easy stuff to do. Kennedy's a real outdoorsman. These are real skills that have value. My daughter was learning how to skin animals. She went to a seminar about it. She tried it. It wasn't all that. She got some equipment for it. It's not that easy to do, right? You have to do it in a certain period of time, like the first, 24 hours after thing's been killed. You have to harvest you have to take the skin off, and there's all these things you have to do with it to process it and make it into like a quality skin. If there's animals that are going to die, and sometimes, animals you have to kill them or whatever on a farm. You got, raccoons going after your chickens, or, even in this case, roadkill. And so what Kennedy was doing there was kind of honorable. Him putting it in the park, that was stupid, right? But kind of funny, right? Him putting a dead bear cub in the park and causing a big commotion. That's kind of funny, right? It's a kind of a practical joke. And so, like, there's nothing wrong with any of that stuff. But this fucking prick who, his dad was a marksman and taught him how to hunt. His brother put up a whole, he talked about his dad. His dad was like an expert marksman in the Marines. He taught other Marines how to shoot weapons. I think something to do with being sniper, and another just, regular rifles and things. And his brother wrote about how they all grew up with guns as part of their lives. They were gun people, hunters, they're outdoorsmen, right? I mean, I think, he has this, he did a video where it's up in New Hampshire. And so his brother put this, this pro-gun, like a post up on Instagram, and had to delete it after Alec Baldwin shot a coworker, because Alec Baldwin had years and years of training with firearms and grew up with them and liked them, right? And has glorified them in various movies. These movies glorify guns, right? I mean, all these people are anti-gun, all these liberals, and he's truly not that. He's not that guy, because he's been around guns and he likes guns. He probably owns firearms himself, right? And so for him to demean this whole like bear cub thing when it's actually a positive thing, and then he's just betraying what he actually believes, right?
I think I might saw it in half and dump it in Central Park. I'll let you know, I'll let you know how it goes. Thanks for the job, man. Yeah.
So that was it. That was his horrible impression. Like,
All right, have fun, Bobby.
they're going to fake applause. Why are you applauding that? There's not anything funny about that. I mean, just horrible. Absolutely embarrassing. Like, how bad is your standard, your quality of control? Holy fuck, that was bad. Right? It was really fucking bad. Holy shit. So before that, this is supposed to be Matt Gaetz, right? And, Matt Gaetz has got a lot of issues, but he isn't effeminate. And they have some, like, listen to this. This is supposed to be Matt Gaetz.
Me for Attorney General. I'm going to do a great job. If anyone tries to break the law, I'll tell them what I told my eyebrows. Freeze.
So that's the impression. They do this thing where they have women who impersonate men, which they're really bad at because they can't they can't even come close to a man's voice. I mean, part of it is, like, a big part of the imitation is the vocal cords. And she doesn't look anything like Matt Gaetz, right? I mean, like, it looks like a woman dressed like some kind of big-headed alien, right?
Come on.
Are you serious with this guy? This guy's giving me the ick.
I know. Me too, but I think he's going to be terrific.
Of course, I had to resign from Congress because the confirmation process comes at the busiest time of year for me.
The holidays?
Girls' volleyball season.
So, really bad jokes. I mean, there's a lot to make fun of here. Like Trump just randomly, we're going to get into Hegseth in a moment. But, like, there's a lot to make fun of here, and they just miss and swing and miss. And this idea that they can just roll out women to do impersonations of men and they suck at it. Like, I mean, there's nothing there. That's not an impersonation. Like, you would never know who this is. I'm like, I heard the volleyball comment. I'm like, oh, I think they mean this to be Matt Gaetz. Like, that's what I heard, what you just heard. I didn't, I went back and went, wait, is that a woman imitating a man here? And so, like, this is just embarrassingly bad. Okay, so I got some clips about Pete Hegseth, whatever his name is. I'm going to get to that. I have a few other things to get to today, and then I'll see what else comes up for tomorrow. I do a lot of mocking and shitting on people here, and I think people think that's like a big part of my life, and it's like really not. Like I've talked about this before. If I just talked about spiritual things, and I talked about things in a positive light, and I talked about what to do, and I talked about homesteading and all these things preparing, there would be nobody here. Like, there would be a fraction of the viewers that are here now. And there was a time where I had to make Illuminati celebrity Hollywood videos, which I enjoyed making. I believed in the stuff more than I believe in it now, but, it's still, I believe in a little bit now. I don't, I've kind of moved on from it, graduated from it. But, these videos, I got millions upon millions of views, hundreds of thousands of views, and some videos millions on others. I had a couple of videos that went over a million views. And, those videos brought in a lot of people that really weren't suited for the more, the spiritual, whatever these videos I make here. But, there's some elements to that they were exposed to because I say things in the middle of the video that were of a spiritual nature, and maybe they didn't pick up on it then, but, it needed to be done. There's a time where I realized I had to make Hollywood videos to make this channel financially viable and make it be successful in terms of getting enough people to watch the content, the important messages that are in. And so I had to dive into this stuff, whatever it might be. Full House videos, and I had to cover depraved people. I learned to enjoy it. I don't have a problem with it. I don't think anything negative about it now. I was a little put off by it in the beginning. I wouldn't say I was angry, but frustrated and disgusted at times. And, with the fact that I had to cover such, like it was beneath me and these things. Now I just don't care. But back in those days, just the idiocracy that was behind the celebrity culture and politics and all these things that I cover, and just seeing it and just the way people react to it and lap it up and all of it, right? It's just a fucking mess. And so, there was some element of that. And, to deal with it, I took it out on the celebrities that suck and, are so horrible and the content they're creating. It's offensive. I'm not offended, but it's offensive, right? It's offensive on how bad it is. Like, you have to have some quality control. Like, when you put out this stuff on Saturday Night Live, you should say, oh, we don't have a show. Like, this isn't a show. We don't have a show. We should just not even put out a show. If this is your lead to open, if this is the beginning of your show, this is supposed to be your funny bits, and you just come out and you fail epically. I mean, I know they're not getting the kind of viewership they used to get because they don't have as much of a market share. When Saturday Night Live first came out, cable wasn't really even a thing yet. And then cable came around, and then it's just been more and more choices. And the more choices you have, the less people that are going to stay up and watch Saturday Night Live. Of course, there end up being like The Daily Show and these other late night shows and all this kind of stuff, right? And the late night shows suck so bad now as well. I mean, not that Johnny Carson was great, but he was certainly better than what we see now. And it's so politicized and so fake and so contrived. It's just really bad. But if you're going to put out this quality content, then you should say we should just get rid of the show. Let's just hang it up. It's time we move on. The show's no longer anything. It's not funny, and the political stuff is just wrong. I mean, they don't think it's wrong, but we know it's wrong, right? It's just horrible. And it's just a swing and a miss. At some point, just, whatever money you're making, whatever, letting something go is hard to do. But Jesus Christ, this show is horrible. Like at some point, you just got to say, hey, this is, we're just going through the motions here. We don't have anything worth saying. So let's just let something else fill this spot, this void, because no one's watching Saturday Night Live anyway. I mean, at least anybody that's worth anything and has half a brain or any sort of standards for their comedy. But in that, like I said, I've hammered Alec Baldwin, probably as much or more than anybody. In the 2 years that I really covered him, and then of course there was the shooting. I was ready to move on, but then the shooting happened. And it would sound like I just disliked the guy more than other celebrities, and he just became a target. But it's of his own making, right? Like he was really bad, and he was putting out political content, and he was pretty harsh about his criticism of Trump and these other people, and so self-righteous and so sanctimonious, like all these celebrities. It was a time where people were just getting tired of celebrities thinking that their opinion matters, right? Like everybody thinks their opinion matters and it doesn't. But celebrities talking about anything other than their celebrity bullshit, they fake being other people for a living. And they can be quite artistic about it. It can be, movies and TV shows can be brilliant, but they're just fakers. They're pretenders. They pretend to be something they're not. That doesn't make them experts in politics. In fact, it's the exact opposite, because they're so out of touch with what normal people deal with, and they are so inflated and they're so self-congratulating, with all these award shows. I mean, is there a bigger self-congratulating industry out there than the music industry and the television industry and the entertainment industry that's constantly patting themselves on the back? They have like 10 or 12 major awards, the three big ones, the Golden Globe and the Screen Writers, whatever it was then, and of course the Oscars, and then the Emmys, and then the fucking, and the MTV Awards. I mean, they're just all over the fucking place with these fucking horrible award shows. And what they do is, it's okay, like it's good, and they're rewarded financially for their work because there's lots of money in these movies and TV shows. Great, right? I mean, if you're going to be, good at what you do and, people reward you for it, sure, great. I fully believe it. That's the capitalist model. I'm not a capitalist, but that's the system we have. And so I don't mind them being rich. I don't mind them being famous. I don't want to hear them talk about anything else unless they're somehow experts in that thing. But they suck at politics because they all have the same point of view, and it's Hollywood liberalism. And they just subscribe to a cult-like view of something that, normal people just don't appreciate, and now they're forcing it down everybody's throats. So that's why Alec Baldwin catches a lot of shit here from me and the rest of the celebrities because of that, right? They're trying to force something that's just failed on every level. They're the worst people, and their morality is the worst morality, and they want everyone to believe what they believe, which is just, batshit crazy. All right, let's move on to Hegseth here. Okay, so this is an MSNBC report on Pete Hegseth. And part of it they put up on YouTube. Part of it is I got it on my phone. I got the whole thing on my phone, but let me show you the first part here, which I got on my phone, and then the second part is on YouTube, and I'll switch over and do it there.
Trump transition. President-elect Trump is now considering replacing his embattled defense secretary of pick. And this is according to two sources who are familiar with the decision-making. Right now, Pete Hegseth is back on the Hill, where in the face of even more misconduct accusations, support is waning.
So there he is with his current wife. He's shaking his head no, but he's smug. Like, he's just really smug and arrogant. And so was Matt Gaetz. Now, Trump is smug, but the way Trump does it is kind of funny, entertaining. But people who are smug like that, they don't have any place inside of them to receive new information. And they think they're better or superior than you are. And they don't listen and they don't respond to nature. I mean, narcissistic personality disorder, right? You can tell by his smug face and just the way he walks and all these things that he just thinks he's better. And there's different kinds of smug like this. It comes with success. It's usually in men who think of themselves as successful. And you just can't talk to somebody like this. Like if they've done something wrong or they, if there's a problem, you have to deal with it. They just won't ever hear it. They'll just block it off and find some way that they're the victim or you're jealous of them or some bullshit thing. And they just think they're so much better than you that they would never listen to any feedback that they get from other people. So they make really poor leaders, right? They just demean people. They talk down to people. And this guy is a user. We know this because of all these allegations are, backing what we see on his smug fucking face right here, right? The guy is just, arrogant and smug.
NBC reports at least half a dozen Republican senators are not comfortable with Hegseth leading the Pentagon. And we also have new exclusive reporting, several current and former Fox News staffers telling NBC News his drinking habits during his time there worried colleagues. Hegseth denies all wrongdoing. But we've learned Trump is already mulling potential replacements for the defense secretary job. Two sources telling us Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is one contender.
Now, Ron DeSantis is just a weird, strange fucking dude. I think he's done a pretty good job in Florida. I don't know that much about it, but some of the things he's done I think are pretty good. But, he wears these shoes to boost his height. Remember, there's that video of him reading some shitty little kids book, children's book about Donald Trump. Right? It was just horrible indoctrination type kind of stuff. And then, he kind of turned on Trump when he was running for president, and Trump hated him and turned on him back. And I don't know if this is a serious post, but as bad and weird and like icky as Ron DeSantis is, he'd be 100% better than this guy, Pete Hegseth. I mean, that's how bad Trump's picks are.
With Hegseth's been on the ropes, his mother is now coming to his defense. Penelope Hegseth became part of the story when the New York Times published an email she sent years ago accusing her son of mistreating women. And she has since disavowed those sentiments, has apologized for sending the email, and she defended her son on Fox just this morning.
Pete is a new person. He's redeemed, forgiven, changed.
Redeemed and forgiven by who, right? She has a cross on. And she says he's changed. He's a new person. So he was a piece of shit before when she wrote the letter. That he was mistreating his former wife, and then he was going through a divorce with another wife who he was gaslighting and mistreating. That he was womanizing, and he uses women. He was being a womanizer, which his mom said. It was a brutal, harsh letter. And now she's backing off of that for whatever reason. He's a chance of success. But she's saying he's changed. Like, he used to be a piece of shit, but he's changed now. And sure, he might be changed, but he isn't really that suited for this job in the first fucking place. He still seems like a smug, arrogant prick. But even with that, right, like, like the guy is, I mean, anybody can be redeemed and changed and whatever, but he's not somebody who's publicly done these things. And it seems like a lot of these things are fairly recent. And so, whenever she thinks he has changed, like, what point did he change, and what things is he being accused of since he's changed, right? Like, when I look at his smug face, I'm like, this guy's just a piece of shit and, like, shouldn't be in a position of power. And I'll tell you why it's different with Trump, because the Democrats are equally as bad. But there's a reason why this is a little bit worse for Trump, and I'll say it in a bit.
I think we all are after 7 years.
So I think she means 7 years after she wrote the letter, the email, the brutal email, that they're all changed after 7. Yeah, of course you are. Physically a little bit. I don't think he's changed at all, but whatever, right? But she's a real dingbat. She's really not good at this.
I believe he's the man for the job. I think being a TV news host, I think prepares you for most things in a position like this. He doesn't misuse women. No. I mean, he's been through some difficult things. I'm not going to list them by name, but I would just say that some of those attachments or descriptions are just not true.
She sounds like Joe Biden defending Hunter Biden. Oh, he's been through so much things. He's sober now. He's sober now. He's been sober for the last 5 years. Yeah, but, what about those other things that he did that were criminal? Like, that doesn't mean, you get a free pass, right? And this guy really doesn't have the experience or any, there's no way this guy should ever, like, this is Trump just doing stupid ass shit, right? Where he nominates somebody without fully vetting him, and he's a nightmare. and these guys are bailing on him. The senators are. So the other thing is 6 senators, Republican senators, are bailing on him. And they can only have 3 that bail on the Trump's appointments. So if 6 bail, then he can't get passed. And that's with every Democrat voting against him, right? And so if 6 senators are bailing on him, his mom comes out after writing a vicious email, and she doesn't say that the email wasn't true. She says that he's changed. So everything in the email at that time was true. And there's all these issues besides that. Like there was already issues before that, right? And they keep on building up. There's more to do with this Fox News stuff, which I'll show you in a second, because that's pretty brutal. And so now there's an alcohol problem. And so all these people who are like, oh, this guy is just, he's being persecuted by Trump. And this is what the guy says himself coming up here.
When asked if she would testify to this for any confirmation hearings, she would not commit. We have NBC News correspondents covering this from all angles today.
Okay, so actually the whole thing is up here on the, I wish I had looked harder, but same thing.
Susan Glasser from The New Yorker. Courtney, Pete Hegseth's Pentagon bid in limbo, and you're reporting Trump's now considering Ron DeSantis for the role, but also a few other names. What are you learning?
Yeah, that's right. So among Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who, of course, has a military background, he was...
It's Courtney Cube.
A JAG, an attorney in the military, and he has experience running a government, running the state of Florida as governor. So definitely has more experience than the current selection, Pete Hegseth, who also...
He's just such a freaking tool.
Served in the military and mainly in the National Guard, but really hasn't had any experience in government or running a large organization. Certainly nothing anywhere near the scale and scope of the Department of Defense.
Okay, as it turned out, the part I wanted wasn't up on the internet, so I had to go back and get it on my phone. Luckily, I didn't delete it yet. So I think this woman's name is Ana Cabrera, who doesn't speak with a Spanish accent. She's from Spanish descent, right? But she's not, she grew up in America. And so Hillary, just bringing this back to Hilaria Baldwin, then we'll get back into Hegseth here. So Hilaria Baldwin has 0 Spanish blood. Her parents are Irish, Scottish, something else. And they're very white. Thomas, whatever their name. One last name is Thomas. The other, I forget the other. Hayward Thomas. Hillary Hayward Thomas. But she changed her name to Hilaria. She wasn't Hilaria. In her high school yearbook, it says Hillary, right? And so, right, she's grew up in Boston with really white parents, and they vacationed in Spain. And I guess she took Spanish, and she learned to speak fluent Spanish. And she decided that she was Spanish, and she started to pretend she was Spanish, and nobody called her on her bullshit until it was too late, right? Until she had been on TV. She was married to a famous guy, and it came out that none of these things were true. All right, let's get back into it here. But you can see this woman doesn't speak with a Spanish accent because people who grow up in America lose their parents might have an accent, but they don't, right?
Frankly, on a daily basis at this point about Hegseth, Anna. So, Vaughn, what's the view inside Trump's team on Hegseth and the alternatives? And were they caught off guard by all these allegations that have come out in the blowback?
Right. The fact that Donald Trump and his transition are now actively looking at alternatives to Hegseth is about the most overt acknowledgement that he is on the ropes, still more than a month before those confirmation proceedings were even to begin, than anything that we have seen publicly yet. Because when you're looking at the fact that alternatives are being considered, you're looking at rather qualified individuals in Joni Ernst, Bill Hagerty, and the likes of Michael Waltz to take on those roles here. And so for Donald Trump, it's a numbers game. He can only afford to lose 3 Republican senators if every Democrat were to oppose his nomination. And frankly, the quickness in which Donald Trump named his selections to be these nominees were questionably made here at this point based off of the hesitancy of Republican senators to promptly jump on board. And so for Donald Trump, I think we should be clear about the Ron DeSantis proposal specifically. Ron DeSantis is somebody who not only Donald Trump sought to end the political career of over the last 2 years, but also several of his top advisors on his campaign, including his incoming chief of staff, Susie Wiles, who ran Ron DeSantis' 2018 gubernatorial bid before switching teams to go and side with Donald Trump in the 2024 presidential campaign. And there was even, at one point during the presidential primary cycle, a very explicit statement that no Ron DeSantis staffer would ever be hired in a potential Trump White House come 2025. So, of course, there is still a lot of resentment towards Ron DeSantis for ever challenging Donald Trump's place atop the Republican Party in 2023 in the first place. So it'd be quite a surprising move.
So here's the thing. Like, this is just the mess that's in Trump world. Trump has grudges and, people have talked shit about him. And then if they come around and they say great things about him, like J.D. Vance or whatever it is, then he'll reverse his opinion of them. But he's very impulsive. He seems to be very obsessed with people's looks, both men and women, in terms of his judgment of them. If somebody looks good, he thinks much higher of them. Well, you're such a good-looking person. Like, he says that all the time, right? I showed you that in other videos. And, if somebody kisses his ass and just plays the part and reminds him of himself maybe a little bit, because there's a lot of Trump and Pete Hegseth and Matt Gaetz. He just picks these people, and he has no vetting machine. I mean, he still doesn't know how to do politics, right? Even after 8 years of this shit, he still doesn't know how to do it, which is kind of hilarious, but then again, it's kind of not, right?
For him to turn to there. But I want to let you look at Pete Hegseth, who just put out a social media post just a few moments ago in which he suggested that he has no intention of dropping out of this bid to be the nominee, in which he writes, quote, "I'm doing this for the warfighters, not the warmongers. The left is afraid of disruptors and change agents. They are afraid of real Donald Trump and me." That
just sucks as a statement, right? The left is afraid of disruptors and change agents. They're afraid of the real Donald Trump and me. But it isn't just the left, because there's Republican senators that have issues. But we know he's done this stuff. His own fucking mother said he did it, right? And she only gave him a mild, like she's saying he's changed in the last 7 years. She didn't walk back what she said. She didn't say that the letter was wrong. And now the letter is being used against him. Things have moved on. Maybe she thinks he's doing better. Who knows? He's bullshitted her about coming to Christ or something, whatever she needs to hear. But the other issue, then he says here, they don't want truth. Our warriors never back down. And mother will I. Well, neither, and neither will I. Neither will I. See, this shows you what's wrong with politics. It's the same thing that cost Joe Biden. He wouldn't come out and say he was going to pardon his son, and they waited till after the election to do it, right? Because everything's going to be used as a weapon against you. And if he came out and said, yeah, I was a real piece of shit before, I did some things I'm embarrassed about. I mean, at least RFK Jr. said he has skeletons in his closet. He's been pretty public about admitting these things. Like he wasn't hiding these things, right? But in terms of, like, he's done these things. Maybe it's not as bad as people say. Maybe his wives, his ex-wives, these girlfriends all have an agenda. Maybe there's some, whatever it is with this kind of stuff. Maybe it's not 100% as bad. He's not 100% as bad as the women in his life said he was, including his mom. But he is, this is part of who he is, right? And he really doesn't have any experience. And he's just like a set of smug, arrogant prick that Donald Trump tapped for this job with not really knowing what the fuck he was doing, because Donald Trump doesn't know what he's doing, right? And the guy can't admit to it. Like, he can't come out and say, I've changed. Yeah, these things are true, but I've changed. Because that'll terminate his ability to get the appointment. So he's got to make up some bullshit story about how he's being persecuted by the left, and really he's not that kind of guy, and this is just all made up, because it's true. Like, he paid off a woman he had sex with, he was cheating on his wife, and all these other issues that came up. Two contentious divorces. I mean, real issues with him. And there's more here about the way he behaved at Fox, which we'll get into, an alcohol problem. And so, there's no honesty in this, and there's no honesty in politics.
Anna?
Courtney, you were also part of the team that broke NBC's exclusive reporting about Hegseth's time at Fox News. Tell us more what you learned from his former colleagues.
Yeah, Anna, we spoke with 10 current and former Fox News employees who sort of laid out this pattern of behavior while he was a host at Fox and Friends, the popular weekend morning show on Fox News, including multiple occasions where he would come into to the broadcast beginning at 6 a.m. only moments before they were going on the air in some cases. At times he would speak about being hungover or clearly be hungover, talk about how he was out late the night before, maybe even didn't make it home. And there were even instances in which he still smelled of alcohol from the night before.
So, he has a cushy job on Fox News, which ended up getting him this job. If he didn't have that job, and he almost got fired because he almost got Me Too'd. So he paid off some woman who accused him of sexual assault. At the very least, he was, just engaging in reckless immoral behavior, getting drunk, sleeping with, skanks and whatever it is. I mean, that's best case scenario at some conference, cheating on his wife or whatever. I mean, if he was married at that time, he's had now 3 wives or whatever it is. And there seems to be a lot of just, misogyny and mistreatment of women in this particular case, right? And best case scenario is not good. It's still a piece of shit, right? But if you show up for this job that's really important to you, it's the gateway to your next job, and you come in drunk or you come in hungover and you're still breathing out fucking alcohol, you come in late and you're talking about it with other people there, and you got to go on air, that's not how you show up for work. This guy's going to leave the Defense Department with no real skills or other than being somebody who claims he's a disruptor, right? This is the kind of piece of shit that Trump nominates and doesn't think about. He doesn't think his way through things, right? This is brutal. And the things just keep on piling up. Now, this woman said they talked to 10 people over at Fox. I don't know if the people are anonymous or not, but they quoted it in stories. So it's part of this. They could just be making this up, but I just don't think they are. It just makes sense with everything else about this guy and what his mom was saying and who he seems to be.
In addition to that, there were also individuals who spoke to us about how he overindulged at sort of Fox News social events. Now, the transition team vehemently denies this, as they have all of these stories, frankly, about Pete Hegseth's character.
And so he was getting divorced because he impregnated a coworker. So he had his mom slammed him for mistreating his first ex-wife and his soon-to-be ex-wife, and what a womanizer, a piece of shit he was. And the woman was divorcing him because he impregnated a coworker at Fox, right? I mean, it's just this isn't the left demonizing you. This is you being a piece of shit, and now everybody knows about it.
That's character, calling the accusations false. But as I said, we spoke with 10 current and former employees who all talked about how this really had an impact on the show and on the staff who he worked so closely with there, Anna.
Okay, so I'm going to show you the Fox News interview with his mom in a second, some of it, because it's more, there's more of it. Defense Secretary nominee Pete Hegseth had a baby with his Fox News producer lover just weeks before claim of drunken sex assault. His marriage had fallen apart when his wife discovered his mistress had given birth to his daughter, and his divorce was about to cost him millions. His life was teetering on his brink as he turned a little too much towards alcohol as a crutch, and that wasn't the worst of it. Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump's defense secretary, as his life threatened to spiral out of control in 2017, smells like Hunter Biden. Just weeks later, Hegseth, now 44, was accused of groping multiple women and sexually assaulting one as alcohol once again allegedly clouded his judgment. The allegation of assault could not have come at a more delicate time for Hegseth. Personally, his accuser made her claims as the divorce proceedings were pending, with his initial case conference set to take place less than 3 weeks later on October 7th. And fearing for his job at a weekend anchor at Fox News, Hegseth decided he should pay the woman rather than fight off the allegations. Okay, so the lover at Fox News is his now wife. So now things make more sense. Teddy Boozervelt, right? There's a guy who loves his alcohol. I think he's a part of that group. There's a group called the Brethren or the Brotherhood, and it's a bunch of Christians who believe Jesus is a warrior. They have like Jesus with muscles and like Jesus holding a gun. They have these houses of guys who are like militarized warriors for Christ, right? They're a big part of the Bush administration. They're neocons. And so here he is with his wife who he was cheating on with when his other wife. So here, let's go through these pictures here. So the birth of daughter Gwen promoted Hegseth's wife, Samantha Deering Hegseth, 43, to file for divorce. And so that was, I don't know if there's other pictures here. I don't know, it's something different. And then it says here that that his typical life at time was appearance, or this is where it says this here. Where's his wife up here? Okay, so I want to look at these pictures again, right? The Teddy Roosevelt. This is Hunter Biden kind of stuff here. And so this is here where he was with Trump. There he is with his daughter, with his now wife, who we'll get into her in just a moment. And then down here, there's them together. It says, Hegseth's third wife, Jennifer Rotchett, was a producer on Fox and Friends. She had her eyes on him all the time and watched him like a hawk, one insider said. The typical life of his time was appearance he had with Rotchett made on Friends at a friend's wedding. They couldn't keep their hands off each other. They felt they were, frankly, an embarrassment. And so it says here, he is a self-styled champion of Christian values, wears his heart almost literally on his sleeves. He has this saying here, God wills it, tattooed on his arm, and the Jerusalem cross etched over his heart. But his faith, family, and freedom version of Hegseth is a very different look from the man who spent the later half of 2017 mired in scandals of his own making. So there he is with her. So this is that warrior stuff. There's the Jerusalem cross. So he's going to be totally pro-Israel. Like he's one of those type of Christians. And, this is his second wife. And they had this child, and she's like wanting to get out of their relationship. He, Hegseth, and Ratchet were seen sitting proudly at a private dinner hosted by President Trump at the White House, along with fellow Fox News contributor Rob O'Neill and his wife, less than 3 weeks after he interviewed by police on his sexual assault claims in October 2017. Hegseth was already on his second marriage when, in August of that year, Rotchett gave birth to their love child, exposing their lengthy affair. The birth of the daughter Gwen promoted Hegseth's wife, Samantha Deering Hegseth, 43, to file for divorce. So when Rotchett and him had the baby, she had to divorce him. The producers ended in a $2 million settlement in which she agreed to pay the mother of three sons, Boone, Gunnar, and Rex, up to $220,000 a month in spousal support plus child maintenance and school fees. So he's got this, mess here. He has three wives, and I think he has Hegseth married Rotchett in 2018, making his third wife, and him the father of 7 in a blended family that includes 3 sons from a second marriage, their daughter together with Rotchett's 3 children from a previous marriage. So he's got all these kids. He's had 3 marriages, and he's just a fucking mess, right? Drunk. He's obviously got alcohol issues. These are all being confirmed by this, these tattoos and this stuff here with Teddy Roosevelt, right? Like this is a guy who has made a lot of bad alcohol-infused decisions. So let's just be clear about this, right? He had a baby he was married to another woman. He had a baby with his producer on his show. He's showing up drunk for, right? He has alcohol issues. And then he has a baby. And then 3 weeks later, just weeks after that, he goes to a conference and he sleeps with, so he's got a girlfriend, he's got a baby mama who he's with, and he's getting divorced from his ex-wife, so he's still married, but he's getting divorced because she's divorcing him because he impregnated another woman. And then he goes out and has sex with this woman in a hotel room who then accused him of sexual assault. This is Hunter Biden shit, right? This is just Hunter Biden. There's no difference between him and Hunter Biden, right? This is the same kind of behavior. And so this piece of crap here, he used to be colleagues with on Fox, and he asked these questions here, but they're trying to they're bringing her on to support Trump and to support Hegseth, who everyone, based on his behavior on the set of Fox News, his lack of experience, his behavior that's so similar to Hunter Biden, like addictive personality behavior, and they should all say this guy is unfit. Like, this is the same shit they should have done with Joe Biden. The guy's senile, the guy has dementia, we can't let him be president. Like, these guys should all know this guy's a piece of shit, Hegseth. He doesn't have the temperament, the ability. It's a bad pick by Trump. Let's just, encourage Trump to move on to somebody else. Instead, they're trying to do damage control and cover up for this bad behavior. It's so fucked.
To Pete, during the 2018 divorce, you say, I have no respect for any man that belittles, lies, cheats, and sleeps around. And you go on and say, you are that man and have been for years. And as your mother, it pains me and embarrasses me to say that, but it is a sad, sad truth. You say, we still love you, but we are broken by your behavior and your lack of character. Mm-hmm. When you wrote that.
So these are guys who are both trying to be Republican Christians, appealing to a Republican Christian conservative type of crowd, right? They've been slamming Hunter Biden mercilessly for being a, alcoholic, drug addict piece of shit. And then you have this guy, the guy ended up having to pay his ex-wife $20,000 a month in child support. I mean, all these things. Like, he's hemorrhaging money, making bad decisions, almost losing his job. And his next gig is going to be defense secretary, right? You're going to put this motherfucker in charge of defense when we're that close to World War III, a guy who has limited experience in the National Guard of all places, and he's a Fox News contributor, and he hasn't run any of these types of agencies. And the other part to this is, why this is worse for Trump. Well, let me get into this rest here, and I'll tell you why it's worse for Trump. This is what I was alluding to earlier.
What's the backstory? What was going on that made you so angry you wanted to write that?
Well, I will tell that story in a moment, but let me make two statements first, and one is to President Trump. And I want to say thank you for your belief in my son. We all believe in him. We really believe that he is not that man he was 7 years ago. I'm not that.
Okay, so she's already going to say this again. So this is where that reference point. Well, yeah, but he was that guy, right? And, maybe he's better now, but, Hunter Biden has supposedly been sober for 5 years. Like, this guy's got real fucking problems that don't go away. And I don't know what's made them go away, but we don't know how many times he's cheated on his now wife and father of his newest child, right? And so, and even if he hasn't and he's not drinking as much, or he's not drinking at all, stuff can come back around when things go south. It isn't like this guy is he's so great at this job. Like, he's not even, he's coming in as a complete newbie. Let me just say this part, because I alluded to it earlier. So why this is worse? Because, all of Biden's picks are typical Washington, D.C. hacks, and they all suck, right? But the problem with Trump is, and the problem with people thinking that you can be an outsider, I make fun of, and I can see the problems that these people all have. I can critique their work. I can tell you what the problem is. And I have a solution in terms of connecting to God inside of you, in terms of being a better person. But in terms of doing these jobs, I couldn't figure out how to do these jobs better. Like, I could get rid of some of the problems, but I don't know what the solutions are, because until you start working in a field of activity, this case, the Defense Department, you don't know all the idiosyncrasies, all these little type of nuances that are involved in these, agencies, these governmental agencies, these bureaucracies. And you might think you can just start coming in with a sledgehammer like Elon Musk wants to do and start gutting the American government. But, this government is very flawed. The system is very flawed. And even though a lot of this is very inefficient, and it's very, it's just, we all know what the government is. We all know how bad the government sucks, right? But some of this stuff that they want to get rid of might be holding the government together. And there might be people they just end up firing that are good, solid workers that are essential to things not falling apart. And if you just go in and start taking a sledgehammer because you have decided you're a disruptor, and Trump doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. He's an arrogant fuck, and he's run so many businesses into the ground. He makes bad decisions like this clown. If these guys go in, all of Biden's pick have to answer to the bureaucracy and have to answer to the system. And that's their one big problem with Trump is that he was kind of going rogue to some extent, but he's not smart enough, and he's not, he's a loser, and he pretends to be a winner. He's not, enough of a winner and an effective person to go in and invent something better and do something better. Like, he might get rid of some problems, but then he doesn't replace them with solutions. And so all these appointments, these guys who come in as disruptors and outsiders, thinking that they know more, and they're gonna, and they have these personalities, these arrogant frat boy personalities, obnoxious, Matt Gaetz and Hegseth and Trump, and they have these, these type of personality configurations, and they go in there and they just start messing things up, and they don't listen to anybody. And next thing you know, you have these disasters, and that's exactly what will happen, because this is a horrible pick by Trump, and he doesn't get it, right?
Mother. And I hope people will hear that story today and the truth of that story. So the other thing I want to say is I am here to tell the truth.
You are? Are you? Because what were you doing when you wrote the letter? I mean, that was the truth then, because you're not saying that there was anything wrong in what you were saying. You're saying that he's changed. And yeah, maybe he has changed, but like, we don't need to take a bet on that. There's all these other people who can do that job, and he has zero experience anyway. Isn't like he's some all-star. Isn't like he's the phenom. He's Michael Jordan or LeBron James or, that guy from the Japanese guy who's the phenom baseball player right now, or any of these people, right? Isn't like he's a once-in-a-lifetime talent. He's some hack that was on Fox News that has very questionable decision-making and doesn't have any experience. We can replace him with any number of other drunks, right? Maybe Hunter Biden isn't doing anything. Maybe Trump can appoint Hunter Biden, like just cut out the middleman.
To tell the truth to the American people and tell the truth to the senators on the Hill, right, especially our female senators. I really hope that you will not listen to the media and that you will listen to Pete.
And you're here to tell us, because you are in the news now. So why did you write that email in 2018?
Right. Well, what
was going on?
Right. Let's go back 7 years, which if we all went back 7 years, we would see that maybe we were not the people we are today.
Yeah, but I mean, the people he was then was a guy who had a great cushy job and was having trouble showing up sober, often breathing out alcohol. I mean, his staff was all saying this. He was married to a woman, and he was banging a woman at work. And then after he impregnated her, his wife was divorcing him, and he went out to some conference and banged some woman in a hotel room, and she said he sexually assaulted her. And he had to pay her off, and then go through the divorce, pay his wife off, and then get married to this other woman who now has this child, and all wearing a shirt that said Teddy Boozervelt. And so he was an alcoholic. Now, not everyone could say that that was their life. Hunter Biden could. That sounds a lot like Hunter Biden's life. But you guys weren't that gracious with Hunter Biden. You weren't giving him a second chance, and you certainly weren't saying he should be defense secretary. Do you want Hunter Biden being your defense secretary? You pieces of shit over at Fox. Admit that this guy's the same guy. He's the same type of person. Same smug look on his face, same arrogant look. It's just that one's a Democrat and one's a Republican. And this is, this guy's unfit, right?
But they were going through, Pete and his wife at the time were going through a very difficult divorce. It was a very emotional time, and I'm sure many of you across the country understand how difficult divorce is on a family. Okay,
so but you sided with his wife, right? You weren't siding with your son, you were siding with his wife.
There's emotions. We say things. And I wrote that in haste. I wrote that with deep emotions. I wrote that as a parent. And about 2 hours later, I should. My husband tells me I should think through things a little bit more. But Pete and I are both very passionate people. I wrote that at a
Okay, so you're saying that you wrote that in haste and made a bad decision, and this guy's going to be defense secretary. he's going to be in charge of war, right? And that he's a very emotional person. He does things in haste like you. He's also an alcoholic. And so now you're lobbying for him getting this position when you're like, you wish you hadn't fired that shot with the letter. But this guy's going to be in charge, this drunk, fucking impulsive guy that makes bad decisions. All right, this guy's unfit for the job. Like, all right, he's a person struggling. Sure, he's an alcoholic. He shouldn't be defense secretary. And Trump should have found this stuff out. Like, Trump sucks for... like, this is so bad.
And about 2 hours later, I retracted it with an apology email, but nobody's seen that. So it was a difficult time. I want to say something about the media. And
yeah, like you put this letter out not thinking there would be any chance your son would be one of the secretaries in a Trump administration in the future, right? Like he was hitting rock fucking bottom, going through a divorce where he had 3 kids. And he was mistreating his wife, and he'd been a womanizer, in your own words. He mistreated women. And then you felt bad about it, right? But in reality, you told him the truth. And whether he accepted the truth or whatever he did with it, and maybe he's gotten better, he still has huge character flaws. You were talking about him having poor character. And yeah, maybe that got better after that. That's great. Like people redeem themselves. We all get better. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. But you guys did the same thing about Hunter Biden when his dad just whined about how Hunter's been sober for 5 years, so therefore he should get away with the felonies he's convicted of, but also not only the felonies he's convicted of and is about to get sentenced to, but all the felonies going back to 2014, right? And this is a blank check that everyone's making that's criticizing, including everyone on Fox News. But you want to give this guy a second chance? This guy's done. Get him out of there. He sucks. He's flawed. The system has shown that this isn't working. It shouldn't work. That it should work, right? The system is rejecting this guy, right? The Republicans are rejecting this guy. He shouldn't be defense secretary. Trump doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. He made a bad nomination here. Okay, so I just was eating dinner. And I was going through the news channels. Of course, there's difference between what Fox is saying and what MSNBC and CNN are saying, right? But this woman who's about to address the media, well, let's watch this here.
part of today is to discredit the media and how they operate. When they contact you, I let a few phone calls go, but then they call you and say they threaten you. That's the first thing they do. Right. They say, unless you make a statement, we will publish it as is. And I think that's a despicable way to treat anyone. Threats are dangerous, and they're...
Okay, so we all know the media sucks. MSNBC and CNN sucks, and they lie. And Fox sucks, and Fox lies. They all lie. Fox was the template, like they've copied Fox. CNN and MSNBC have copied Fox. But, you know, you wrote this letter. And like I said, I was just tuning into Fox, and they were talking about how this is a media smear campaign to undermine Trump's decision here. But Trump's already looking for a replacement because they all know this guy's fucked, and really, Trump should have never picked him. And this woman, to blame the media, you know, the media didn't write that letter you wrote to him 7 years ago, and the media didn't behave the way your son behaved so that you would write the letter, right? And so, yeah, the media sucks, and the media is horrible, and these government's horrible, and, you know, anybody who wants to be a part of this fucking mess is crazy and usually a piece of shit, right? But your son doesn't deserve this position and shouldn't get it, right? He's unfit.
They're hard on families.
So, to recap, you were angry about what was going on, his behavior during the divorce.
Right.
And so you wrote that email. And then, you know, a couple hours later, you apologized. Mm-hmm. And you guys talked and you worked it out?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So how did his ex-wife did you send her a copy of the email? Because if he just got the email, he didn't certainly give it to his ex-wife and the woman he's going through a divorce with. So you're leaving out a part here. How did his wife get the email? Because if 2 hours later you retracted it, it could have stayed between you and your son. But if you sent a copy to your ex-wife who then used it in the divorce because, you know, it should have been used because everything that you were upset about was true, right? He was an abusive, alcoholic piece of shit, right?
Pete and I are very close today. In fact, our whole family is very tight-knit. But I think that we as parents, we always parent.
No, I get it.
I mean, and that was 7 years ago.
It means absolutely nothing because for the rest of it, it's today. Like we're learning about your son and whether it happened 7 years ago. And this isn't the only thing that's happened in this past 7 years. Like he was an alcoholic, had issues at Fox and all these problems. Whether he's redeemed himself in that time, that's how we know him. Like you were a person who said he had poor character. Are you going to tell us how he resolved this? The thing's 17 minutes long. I can't watch all of this stuff. Let me fast forward and go through this and see if there's anything else worth watching. But you're going to talk about how he redeemed himself because, if he redeemed himself, there has to be a system that he used. Okay, so Pete Ducey's is actually asking real questions here, so I don't know if they're trying to get rid of this guy too. But listen to this doozy.
Right. There are, and you wanted to come on to talk a little bit, and you mentioned a moment ago the media scrutiny. There are allegations of sexual assault, excessive alcohol use, infidelity, financial mismanagement. As a parent, that's really hard to hear.
Right. Well, our job as parents are to correct. They are to speak truth. And I am a
So she's basically saying all those allegations are true, but he's a great guy today. But he shouldn't be defense secretary.
Passionate person like Pete, and sometimes emotional words come out. I don't believe any of that is true, any of it.
What do you mean? You said this stuff when you wrote him the letter. You confirmed all these things, and you just confirmed a bunch of it. You said he was struggling. He's a better person today. And there was infidelity. He cheated on his wife, and then he cheated on his girlfriend, right? With a woman that claims that she sexually assaulted him. And so the sexual assault possibly isn't true. It's a he said, she said. He clearly was an alcoholic. They're reporting that all over the place, which you knew about. He's making a lot of these decisions. He's running his finances into the ground. She's got like a little rocket ship or a little dildo or something here next to her cross.
And I'm here. I wouldn't be sitting in this chair today if I didn't believe that about my son.
Right. How's the family holding up?
Oh, we're okay.
Oh, they were great. We're just wonderful. She talks about her deep faith in God here.
And I'm here. I wouldn't be sitting in this chair today if I didn't believe that about my son.
Right. How's the family holding up?
Oh, we're okay. We have a deep, deep faith, not only in each other, but in God.
Deep faith?
Our friends have been amazing. The support we've been receiving has been amazing. So we're trusting in our God and in our faith and in our family.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so maybe you should trust God's telling you your son isn't fit for this fucking job. It's just better for everyone that he moves on, right? Like you're basing, like this is a problem with Christians who are also believers or who are Christians and also so-called patriots. And you really can't be both. I mean, to a certain extent you can until you can't. Because there's always going to be a time where being a patriot and doing what was best for your country is going to go against what's best for your divine self, your soul, and your spiritual path. That God's path and your country's path are not, especially now our country's so fucked up, right? So there are a lot of things that you have to do, that politicians have to do to keep the country going that are immoral and go against God's will, right? And there's a lot of things in America that are like that, almost all of it. And so this idea that you can be a spiritual person and do a job like this and drone kids in foreign countries that don't deserve it, like Biden did, or all these other things, allow the Palestinian people to be killed because you believe that God likes Israel and Jewish people more because of your biblical beliefs, like those are not, that's not being spiritual. That's not being connected to God, right? But then there's this doozy by Ducey.
What do you say to people who have read the stuff about Pete or heard the stuff about Pete? You're here, you said he has changed.
Oh, Absolutely.
How do you convince people of that?
Okay, well, I start with 4 things. First, I have a very intelligent son. I have a leader son. I've known that since he was 2.
Okay, so that means nothing, right? Because he's also an alcoholic, right? So you want to go back to when he was 2. All right, let's go back 7 years. He has maybe some good qualities that, that you think are important, but they're not good in terms of what he's going to be doing at the Defense Department.
He went to Princeton and Harvard. By the way, he returned the Harvard diploma, but I wouldn't let him return the Princeton because I worked too hard.
What do you mean you worked too hard? Did you do his homework for him?
That one's going to stay. That's on his wall. He's written 2 New York Times bestsellers.
Oh, boom. Well, he should be defense secretary. You know what? If Stephen King doesn't want the job, or the woman from Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling, or any number of these other, so what? Like, he's written a couple of books. Okay, great. He wrote a couple of books that were bestsellers to a bunch of people who are Republican in nature and believe in the same bullshit that Trumpers and he believe in.
What mother can say that? And one of them is about war and defense.
Oh, no way. Well, he must be an expert then. He wrote a book about it?
So he already has a playbook.
His novel is a playbook, right?
You talk about experience. He's
You
also
wrote a book on war and defense. Yeah, that doesn't mean shit.
put his life on the line twice overseas for our country, one in Iraq and one in Afghanistan.
You mean he was in the National Guard supporting like real troops? Again, these are things that might help him a little bit, but those aren't real qualifications for running a federal agency, right? Especially when Trump's your president.
Very proud Blue Star mom. There it is, right there. And
there's a blue star. I thought it was a dildo.
He's still a warrior, and that's why he's still
He's
fighting.
a warrior. He's a warrior when he's not drunk.
That's why we're all still fighting, because we believe in the good.
And usually with confirmation hearings.
Okay, so this is just an absolute mess. I want to move on here. But she's not telling anything about, I'll go through it to see if she says anything about how he changes. But really, there's nothing here. She's actually doing more harm than good. So she says that most of this is disinformation, but she keeps on repeating, you got to know Pete today. Not Pete of yet. What about Hunter Biden of yesterday, right? Because people do change, but he's defined, and your letter is defining him. Like, this is how he's going to be remembered, right?
It's like you probably hate to turn on your phone because it's like, hey, it's my cousin telling me the latest news about Pete.
But I know Pete, and the people
she knows him.
Know us know Pete, and Trump knows Pete.
Trump knows Pete. Trump knows fucking Pete.
And he knows the Pete of today.
He knows the Pete of today, not that guy from 7 years ago that was a misogynistic, abusive piece of shit, right?
And he knows the Pete who is a good father.
Boom.
A good husband.
Good husband now, not cheating anymore.
To Jen, he's got 7 kids.
7 kids.
He's a wonderful son.
Great son.
Wonderful son. And a wonderful son to his brothers and all his friends. He's a changed man, and I just hope people will get to know who Pete is today.
Okay, so you're saying this is all disinformation, right?
Especially our dear female senators, that you would listen to him, listen with your heart to the truth of Pete.
Okay, so she keeps on talking about him changing, but she won't say how he changed, right? Like some part of him had to change. Like there had to be some method he used. Like what was his method? What did he do? What did he, how did he confront the issues that he had? And you don't change by saying the media is trying to smear you. Now, maybe some of the stuff is being exaggerated. Some of it's being taken out of context. Some of it, maybe he has changed to whatever extent, right? But again, like it isn't necessary that he's defense secretary. Like they can get somebody else. Trump obviously should have vetted him better. Shows you what a sucky fucking president Trump is. Like Trump had said in his interview with Joe Rogan that he had to pick insiders his first term because there was no Trump people. There was no people that believed what he was into or believed what Trump believed because, it was a new movement And Trump didn't know what the fuck he was doing because he never been in politics before. So he had to pick insiders who all worked against him and wouldn't do what he wanted them to do. And that was a big part of his whole problem. That's why he had to fire all these people. But now he says he knows better how to do it. But he said the other reason that he had to appoint insiders is if you take somebody out of the public sector, they haven't been vetted yet. And so you don't know what they're going to pull up on the guy when you appoint the person. So if the person isn't a politician, hasn't been appointed to anything, they might have a lot of skeletons in their closet. But Trump said that he would do a better job of that as his second term, and he's done a horrible job. Because Matt Gaetz had already been vetted, and he had enough shit in his closet that Trump, and he had enough ill will on Capitol Hill that they should have known that it was going to not work out with Matt Gaetz. And now this guy, right? And he's not going to get Kennedy through. And so I don't know how many people he's even going to get a chance to. I mean, so a lot of these people he's going to have to replace them time and time again because he makes impulsive picks and he doesn't have a good system to figure out which guys are going to get through or which people he's not vetting them properly.
What I heard you say just.
And so anybody with half a brain realizes this is not damage control because she's confirming what happened in the past, right? She's saying that he's changed. And Peter Ducey, like, listen to this.
You said just a moment ago, Penny, was he's a changed man.
He is.
So the man you wrote to in 2018, who you were really mad at.
As a mom.
He is different than that man.
Absolutely. I believe that with all my heart.
Yeah, but again, there has to be some, I mean, if this is a redemption story, right? And so you have these preachers that go out and they, abuse some kids or they cheat on their wives or they get addicted to cocaine and then they get exposed and, they're stealing money, they're doing bad shit. And they still have a following of people that want to believe in them. And they come back out of rehab and they say they're changed and they beg God for forgiveness. It's a big part of Christianity. And, being redeemed is great. And everybody should be working to be redeemed. Like everyone should be working to be better and more spiritual and building their character. I mean, it's part of what the Sajbarg method of meditation that I do is. We all should be working on self-improvement. And that should never stop. Like, you should be a better person by the time you die than you were when you were, like, as I want to say as a kid, but you go through your adult years where you form your personality and then you make some bad decisions as adults. And maybe not even bad decisions, you just got a bad attitude and you're, selfish and whatever. And then over the course of your life through marriage and kids and jobs and just life and, relationship with God, you learn to improve yourself, you become a better person. And that should be for everybody. But people say this shit all the time. Oh no, I beg for God and I'm redeemed. I know, I'm a sinner and all this shit that you hear these pastors say. But how did you do it? What was the method you used to change? What was when you hit rock bottom? What did you go through? And when you come out and say, it's the media just trying to smear him, but you keep on saying over and over again, he's a changed man. So you're admitting he was a piece of shit. And that piece of shit 7 years ago should definitely not hold this position. So what's happened in the past 7 years that would make him a good Secretary of Defense, right? Not just his mommy saying he's better, just like Joe Biden saying that Hunter is sober now 5 years. Great, but he committed crimes before that, right? And so, like, there's nothing here. There's no substance to what she's saying because she's saying he's changed, but there's no evidence that he's changed. And she doesn't have any sort of, like system in which he used to change to become a better person, right? Like maybe you're happier with him and maybe he's matured a little bit. But what happens when shit hits the fan and he regresses and goes back to the person he was, which almost always happens when someone gets a powerful position. He didn't handle the Fox News celebrity position very well. How the fuck is he going to handle being secretary of a major? I mean, he's like, one of the top people in the government. He's going from a failed Fox News host and a failed husband and, an alcoholic and a piece of shit that his mom wrote him a scathing letter about his poor character and his abusive tendencies. And you're going to hand him a position he's untrained for and doesn't deserve in a time where we might go to war again. And you don't think he's going to revert to his old ways? Like, of course he is, right? Like, Okay. I want to move on. I just want to hear if she gets to any point where she says, this is how we change, right? But this is great right here.
I believe that with all my heart. And I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't believe he's the man for the job.
What do you, as you look at what is going on in Washington, D.C.,
correct.
This is the way it works. You know, there are people who want Pete to get the job. There are people who don't want Pete to get the job. As a mother, that's got to be tough. Well, they don't like my son. Then you add on these allegations, and it's like, okay, it becomes a little more complicated.
You know, Pete and I
becomes much more complicated.
Right. Pete and I are both warriors.
They're both warriors, okay.
And I've developed a really tough skin over the years. First raising Pete. And
because that kid was a piece of shit. I mean, I had to develop tough skin because, boy, was he trouble. Boy, that fucking guy, man. I thought he was going to be frickin' Satan. I thought I had a little Beelzebub. I thought he was the Antichrist. I kept on looking at the back of his head for 666 because that is the classical moment. Like, you know, stop shitting on your son. Like, you're there to defend him. Stop shitting on him, right? Stop bringing up his past and saying he's redeemed, saying that he's a much better man now. And now you're talking about what a shitty kid he was.
No, Pete and
it becomes much more complicated.
Right. Pete and I are both warriors. And I've developed a really tough skin over the years. First raising Pete, and then going through war, saying goodbye to his son to war. What mom needs to do that. And then his accomplishments and his qualities as a leader.
Okay, so again, you're not helping out. Like, you're coming off like a dingbat, which is, you know, it's not a good situation. You're throwing him under the bus. You're saying shit like you just, I mean, get rid of this guy, right? Is there an eject button? Like, you know, there was that show, like I think it was Ellen's show where they used to send people down a tube, like in the fucking Willy Wonka. Like, just move on. The guy's, you know, he's not fit for this job. We all know it. Trump fucked up. We know he's going to withdraw. We know Trump's going to pick another guy. This guy's damaged goods. You know, why you guys just... It's just not helpful. Move on. You can do something else. Maybe he'll go back to Fox. So we asked her if she had regrets of making the email, and she said, well, parents make mistakes, this thing or that thing or the other thing, right? But here's just her repeating the same thing over and over again.
I think people need to listen to him, get to know him, not the Pete from 7 years ago, but the Pete of today.
Right.
Okay, so was Pete 7 years ago the Antichrist? Because the more you talk about him, like when he was born, he was such a difficult kid, and I mean, like, Jesus Christ! Come on, lady, you're making it worse, right? Okay, so it gets worse, like right immediately. Like, so right after she said that thing, she said this happens.
During the confirmation hearings coming up, if Pete continues with this nomination process, you might be called. Would you testify in front of Congress?
I don't have an answer to that right now, Steve.
What do you mean the answer is yes? What are you talking about? Like you I don't know if I'm going to testify on my son's behalf, right? Like,
thought about that.
What about the other people involved in the other
Why wouldn't you testify? You know, like, this guy should ask better questions. I mean, these are pretty good questions, but he's not doing the follow-ups.
They too will probably be called to tell their story because you wanted to come on to tell your side of the story.
Yes.
Which
but you don't want to do it in front of Congress. You don't want to swear on the Bible and defend your son, especially the one from 7 years ago.
They will probably get that same opportunity.
Yeah. Well, that's up to them. I only have so much control.
Yeah.
But I want to make two final statements. I want to thank Fox.
Okay, so Jesus Christ, this was bad. Okay, she thanks all the people at Fox for having her on, and the makeup people and all the other people. But here is the killer. I mean, this guy, I don't know if he's just trying to get rid of him or what it is, but I mean, he isn't helping her out here.
Somebody gave the New York Times that
They
email.
did.
How many people got your email? Was it just to Pete?
I haven't been able to track that, like my blind copy or my copy. I don't.
Okay, so it's from 2018, so it really wasn't 7 years ago. It was between 6.5 years ago or whatever it was, right? But she doesn't know who she sent it to because, like I said, if it was just between him and her, then how the fuck did the New York Times and more importantly his ex-wife get it? Because his ex-wife used it and filed it in divorce as part of the, this was all part of it, right? That his mother was even talking shit about him, being a womanizer and mistreat. Like his mother confirmed the shit that she was saying about him, right? Like she was siding with his soon-to-be ex-wife that he was cheating on and all this shit. The Pete of 7 years ago.
I don't think that's important, right?
It's fucking really important.
Now, I think what's very important is that the truth be told about that email. And
yeah, but like the truth is partly, who else did you send it to? Did you send it to, because it was used in the divorce. And so 2 hours later, you sent a retraction and your son didn't just delete the email. You guys could have both deleted it. It could have been between you two people, unless there was spying going on. Like, this is really important. Like, who else did you send the email to?
And that we look at Pete today, not then.
Mm-hmm.
And
the Pete of today, not the one that wrote that email, that piece of shit back there, that womanizing, abusive piece of shit that was gaslighting his poor wife, impregnating another woman, and then right after that, sleeping with some other woman who was gonna say that he sexually assaulted her. Not that Pete. That fucking Pete. That's Pete suck. But the new Pete is great.
I'm here.
Holy shit! It just got worse. I'm trying to get out of this thing, but the whole thing's great.
Right now, I think what's very important is that the truth be told about that email, and that we look at Pete today, not then. Mm-hmm. And I'm here.
You say it's important that people know the truth. Is there some part of that story that has been depicted in the media that is not true?
Oh, of course.
Which
part?
Which part? Just tell the part.
He's. I don't want to use the words, but he doesn't misuse women. No, I mean.
Even though I said it in the email.
He's been through some difficult things. I'm not going to.
Just like Hunter Biden.
Them by name, but I would just say that some of those attachments or descriptions are just not true, especially anymore.
Especially anymore. Holy shit. So they were true and they're not now? Is that, the Pete of the past, that guy I've been talking about, that sociopath that I said has a poor character and I was ashamed of as a mother. And that, all that stuff that I said, those things are not true, at least not anymore. That was great.
It sounds like you're a little disillusioned. Have you lost trust in how things happen?
No, listen, I came to take on New York City, to take on the New York Times, to be a mother, a strong mother, a fighter.
What's your message to the New York Times?
I would say I don't think the way you operate it feels almost criminal when reporters call you and threaten you. I don't think a lot of people know that's the way they operate.
Yeah, okay, the media sucks. We all agree on that. But this isn't about the media. Because you fucked your son by putting out this letter. But you actually did the country a favor, right? Because this guy's a disaster. And you're not helping. But anyways, let's move on here. Okay, just to wrap this thing up here. She seems like a nice lady, I'm not trying to shit on her. And she's trying to be a mom or whatever. And she's trying to get it out from under her, writing this well-deserved email to her her son who was fucking up, right? Like everybody goes through difficult times, and I don't even care about this. The guy seems smug and arrogant. They're all sucky. All the people that have these positions are sucky. It's just, this is par for the course, right? But the reality is that this guy is not fit for the job. And there is a process here that, there's a scrutiny, there's some level of, this is the hiring process, right? And if you're trying to find out what he did at his last job, well, he showed up late to work. 5 minutes before he was supposed to go on or whatever, short period before he went on. He was hungover. Sometimes they could smell the alcohol on him, like he hadn't even been home. Like he came right from the bar to work and was on in the morning. And he had an alcohol issue, which was documented by his mom and then all these other decisions he's made, right? And so he was married to a woman. They had 3 kids together. And he was treating her and mistreating her, according to his mom in this letter, and then everything else, right? After his mom said he mistreated his first wife. And so he mistreated these women. He was abusive. He had poor character. That's what she said in the letter. Like, she hated to write it. She loved him, but this is, this some tough love she was giving him, right? And while that was happening, he ends up impregnating somebody he works with, which is just bad. It's a bad thing. I mean, he's already married, and he's supposed to be Christian and all this stuff, right? So, these are bad decisions. And this is what he did at his last job. And then, a few months later, he goes to some conference, and he sleeps with some woman who accused him of sexually assaulting her. And then he pays her off while he's going through this divorce. He just had another kid with another woman, and it's, the whole thing. And this is all, his whole life is blowing up. He's making bad decisions. That's his last job. I mean, these reports, all that we're hearing, they're all, maybe they're exaggerated, whatever it is, but there's lots of truth to them. I mean, they're 80% true at least because of all the confirmation we've had. And, you're looking at his past employer and saying to Fox News, how was this guy? If they were being honest, he was a fucking disaster, right? And he was just, talking shit on Fox News. It's nothing like making decisions about people's lives and in terms of war and all these other things. And a job that he's ill-suited for, not trained for. And he's a Hunter Biden. Like, he's, the same kind of personality type, same issues, same things they say about Hunter Biden, they're saying about him. Oh, he was really smart. Yeah, but not smart enough to stop fucking drinking and making bad decisions, right? Like, all right, he banged a coworker and he was going to have a baby with her. He was going to divorce his second wife and go with this other woman. Did he really need to go to that conference and sleep with some other woman and put his, his whole new situation in jeopardy? I mean, what the fuck, right? And so, this is a hiring process, and everything we see here, he should not be hired. If it wasn't such a tumultuous hire and it wasn't such a disastrous pick, I would almost want him to get the job. Just because it would be totally fucked up, and I like things like that. But my God, this guy should not be hired. It's a slam dunk, right? We don't need to go any further. What is this thing? But all the things that have happened, this guy just shouldn't be hired for that position. So it's just obvious. I don't know. Anyways. Okay, so today's Thursday, December 5th. And there's been one more thing with Pete Hegseth. There's one other story. Then I got a kind of a different voiceover I wanted to do this morning about, just my personal journey into spirituality, which I've talked about in the Journey series, but this will also be a part of that. But I just want to add that because of just the need of the time. So this is the first part here.
All right, let's go through the allegations, including the first one that got this whole campaign against you started, and that was this anonymous accuser. And by the way, just so the audience knows,
right there it said there's a thing that came up there, right? No BS, no agenda, no fear. No BS, right? No agenda, no fear. She's a very fearful person. Like, she talks like she's nervous or she has that kind of voice, but that's whatever that is. But she clearly has an agenda here, and there's a lot of BS, right? Like, Megyn Kelly is trying to rebrand herself as a truther. Some sort of right-wing truther, or these, along the lines of Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan. They're now realizing there's an audience, a much bigger audience that's there for people like that, who aren't real truthers, but they're, truther adjacent. And I have no problem with it in terms of, I'm not a truther police person. Like, I'll comment on things in my videos, but I don't feel like I have to cleanse the truth community and, hold other people accountable or whatever it is. Like, people used to get into that in the truth community. Maybe I'm sure they still do. Exposing shills and, I just don't care about any of that shit because none of it makes a difference. People expressing their opinions on the internet is good, like it's a positive thing, and it maybe helps people change their internal world and their perspective of things, which is it's a good thing. It's why I do what I do here, but it isn't going to change the system, right? And, people are lying all the time, every day, everywhere, and on the internet as well. And so I don't care about it. Like, it's whatever it is. But, it is a problem when people come into something that we all built, right, that many of us were a part of for a long time, and they are putting their shitty they're making it worse, and they're ruining it to a certain extent, especially if there's more censorship coming, which I'm sure at some point there will be.
Anonymous accuser. And by the way, just so the audience knows, I too have looked through all of the accusations, all of the reports against you. There is not one name, not one person accusing you of any sort of...
Yeah, but there's a reason for that, right? Somebody accusing... look at the people who accused Trump of things, how much they were harassed. And so somebody being anonymous, and I don't know if this thing's true or not, right? Whether he sexually assaulted this woman, but it doesn't have to be true, because this guy's a fucking disaster with the things his mom fucking said about him, right? Like, it isn't like, this shouldn't, in her view, shouldn't go this way, where she's buttering it. This is the same kind of thing that Jimmy Kimmel's did with Hunter Biden. When Jimmy Kimmel's got on his knees and serviced Hunter Biden when he wrote a book about his crack addiction and just talked about what a great guy he was and didn't ask any, hard questions about, like, the stuff Hunter Biden has now been pardoned for. People are judged for their past in D.C. in these things. Like, it doesn't matter how long ago, how much you've changed. It's just anything that you've done. This is the whole Me Too movement. People go back 12 years, you're going to be a completely different person. People change. We'll get into that in a bit. And so Megyn Kelly, you see here, I'm noticing this, I'm editing. She is in a defensive position with her arms crossed almost the whole interview. Like she's creeped out by this guy, but she's been told she has to, she's got to do some, this is supposed to be her boosting him, right? And helping him out because of their whole new thing. But she's like, creeped out by him. Okay, so the name of the video here is Pete Hegseth responds to accusations of R, settlement to the accuser, and how he changed his life. And I want to find the part of how he changed his life. I just want to share the introduction here first.
Of misconduct has gone on the record with their accusation. It is all anonymous from NBC, CBS, The New Yorker, the usual suspects. The usual suspects.
Like, she is the, just throwing mainstream media under the bus. When this guy's mom is the one who, the things that she said about him, right? And he's, this interview, he's going to talk about how he changed his life, that he was a piece of shit, that he needed to change his life, right? Which is, a big part of the whole thing. And let's get to this part here.
And yet you are having person after person go on the record in your defense about your character, from, Will Cain and Dan Bongino at Fox, Joey Jones at Fox, the entire Fox and Friends crew this morning.
Okay, so she Me Too'd Fox. She and a couple other women who were on Fox talked about how they were sexually harassed on different levels. That there was, you see in Fox that the women that are on Fox News, they dress a little bit more, they have to be more of like traditional women, but also like they have to dress like sexier and all this kind of stuff, right? They have to put more effort into their appearance. That's the way it's always been at Fox, which it was a part of the guy, Roger Ailes' vision. And Roger Ailes was accused of sexually harassing these women. And I forget who it was with Megyn Kelly, but there was, that movie called Bombshell, which he has recently talked about how Charlize Theron, who played her, that they stole her story about that, right? So she left Fox News and with a settlement and about this sexually toxic environment there and how her colleagues and people threw her under the bus and these other women. That was part of the story. And they didn't want to come forward, and they backed people that were sexual abusers, right? And now she's saying that this guy got the backing of Fox when he himself hooked up with a woman there when he was married to another woman, right? Which is, all this stuff, he shouldn't be in any sort of higher office. It's all out there and exposed, right? Like anybody who has these, they're all about morality. This is Bill Clinton stuff. This is Hunter Biden stuff. He had an alcohol issue. And so that's what you address. Like you can say, all right, the accuser is lying, right? Let's just finish this little part here.
standing up and defending you.
Dozens of people from my vets organizations
Medal
that
of
were
Honor
with me
winners.
everywhere.
Yes. So that, just so the audience knows, but we do need to go through
Sure.
what people are saying so you have the chance to address it. So the first is this alleged rape that took place in 2017 at a hotel out in Monterey, California, where the allegation is that you were the keynote speaker at a Republican women's conference.
Okay, so like, the thing is that he was cheating on his wife or his girlfriend who just gave a baby. He just gave him a baby after he was cheating on his wife that had 3 children. So like he should be done just because of that, right? When we grew up, like Megyn Kelly's around my age. This guy's a little bit younger, but still. If you're going to be Christian, you're going to be moral, you're going to have a higher standard. The stuff that we know from his mom, the fact that this guy has to change his behaviors, right? All these things, he's done. Like the fact that these accusations are floating out there that he paid the woman off, and even if and she was a married woman, I mean, the whole thing, right? There's just this element. Like, you can't trust cheaters. I want to say this, you have to make a distinction between, whether, like, say, a marriage is over and the marriage is dead, but the people can't move on because they have kids. There's different levels of cheating. And some of these things I wouldn't consider cheating, right? What I'm talking about here is you have a spouse or, a partner or whatever it is, boyfriend, girlfriend, somebody that is serious who's upholding their end. And you like that relationship. Like, you don't want to end that relationship. That the person is, doing a good job in the relationship. Like sometimes it's, one person still wants to have a sexual relationship. The other person is just, it's like something like that. There's these different, kind of characteristics to what people would consider cheating or adultery or whatever it is, right? But let's talk about the ones where you have a good wife at home, like in this guy's case, and she's given him 3 kids, and she's trying, and this guy's an alcoholic piece of shit who's womanizing and having probably multiple affairs, while still wanting to have his wife at home doing her job and providing, her, whatever she's doing on her side, right? And so when you want to have 2 things, you want to keep your existing relationship, but you want to go off and have sexual relations on the side and maybe relationships or maybe 2 families or whatever it might be. Like, it's just, there's one thing that I realized when I was a younger person, that your significant other, the person that you say, you love the most, right? Like the person that you end up marrying or these people that you're dating seriously, and you love them on a different level than you love your other, your family, your friends. There's a person that's your life partner, your soulmate or whatever, right? And if you're saying you love that person, and you do love that person, you feel love for them. Like, the words are one thing, but feeling love in your heart for somebody else, right? And, I had a number of people who were cheaters, like friends of mine. My brother later, I found out he was a serial cheater. I just talked about him. I have this video on the Gratefullness meditation channel I just put up about techniques in the Sizemore system to help people get over sexual addiction and things, to do with the meditation. It's not things that people can do on their own. They're not techniques that can be put out there for people like in, sexual addiction groups and things. But it's, I have on these techniques, these special meditative techniques for specific things, special cleaning techniques and things that help people regulate these kind of tendencies, especially now where kids are growing up addicted to pornography and these other things. So I cover this. And I was talking about my brother, right, who was like a second father to me. And he had been a serial cheater, and his wife was a good wife and stood by him. He had agoraphobia. He had issues. He was somebody who was not an easy person to be in a relationship with. And he was having relationships with multiple women, probably 50, 60 women when he was with her, like a womanizer. And his behaviors continued when he started doing the meditation that I did. And of course, I knew about it then. But he left his wife on his son's birthday when he was he was like 10 years old or whatever it is, for this younger blonde woman, much younger than his wife, and it was a whole thing. And, it wasn't like he was just cheating on his wife, he was cheating on all of us, right? His kids, and then to me a certain extent. And I believed in him, and, he had issues. He had sexual addiction. He, had issues from Vietnam. I mean, it's real, real issues. Like, I understand he had, it was beyond just a normal type of situation. But I had friends who were cheating. And in some cases, their girlfriends realized I didn't like to lie. My best friend from high school was, in that case, his girlfriend, who I was friends with, who I liked. She was, she was somebody I didn't like at first, but then I found she was a good person. But she was putting me in the middle of it and trying to get me to, get me to rat out my friend who, was putting me in a bad position because there's this bro code. You're not supposed to talk about your friends cheating, which, again, I don't believe in now because that's just a shitty position to put somebody else in. Like, I'm not going to lie for somebody else. But back then, I didn't know better. And so, there's this thing that if this person is a person you say you love and you're intimate with, whether it's you're dating them or you're married to them, you owe them the truth, right? If you've moved on, then break up and go with somebody else, right? Like, it's that simple. But if you want to keep what you have with them, but also have something on the side, it's a betrayal. And this guy's, supposed to be a military guy. And he's, if you will lie and cheat on the person you say you love the most, then who won't you cheat on? Your country, your fellow soldiers. I mean, if you're that kind of person who's in a good relationship with somebody who loves you, and you don't have the decency to tell them the truth, that you want to move on and do something else, right? You want something extra, or you want something new, or whatever it is, then just tell the person. You owe them the fucking truth, right? And if you won't do that, then how can you be trusted for somebody who's just like a business partner or anything? You can't be trusted, right? You're an untrustworthy person. Because all the shit that goes on with it, right? All the lying, all the deception, all the covering up, all the gaslighting in his case, right? And so, Megyn Kelly should know better because of her own personal situation with Fox. She came out of what she called a toxic environment in Fox, which I'm sure exists to some extent, because Fox really hasn't changed. Roger Ailes is dead, but it's still very similar. And this guy's, he's just one of those guys. He's a predator like the people that she outed. And so, this accusation that this woman did might not be true, right? Let's listen a little bit more about here.
That you were drinking into the wee hours and that a female so-called handler of yours who was meant to see you from A to B went back to your room with you to shepherd you there, found herself inside the room that you allegedly blocked the door. She, quote, remembers saying no a lot. And the next thing she knew, things got very fuzzy and you allegedly raped her with her husband and children in their own hotel room down the hall. The police investigated. They chose not to charge. The DA did not see probable cause to charge this case. We found out from the police report certain
See, there's a lot wrong with what you just said. He was like really, really drunk to where he was staggeringly drunk and had to be brought back to his hotel room. He's got a pregnant or wife he's got a newborn baby at home. She's married. She's got her family staying in a hotel room near him, right? And so, he's drunk to where he's, this was part of his behaviors, like his alcohol problem. The guy had an alcohol problem. His mom's documented it. All these people at Fox have documented it. He was coming in drunk. And so, again, he's making decisions about the fucking, World War III and shit, right? He's a part of this. He'd be in charge of the army. He doesn't have any real experience. He's, his last job, like I said, he's got blown out at Fox for his behaviors. So, minimizing this, for what they're talking about, he's interviewing, auditioning for a job that he not qualified for, and a bunch of shit that's come up of scandals and things that should preclude him from doing the job, right?
Exonerating details, which none of the media will report, like you said it was consensual, there was no drug, and she wasn't drugged in any way, and she's on.
Okay, so, all this stuff, it's consensual, right? But, they're all cheating, right? He's cheating on his wife. He's still not divorced from. His girlfriend just had a baby. And, his kids and the whole thing. When you cheat, it's like you're cheating on your whole family, right? It's not just your wife. And if you can't be trusted, if you're not going to be true to them, then who are you going to be true to? You're supposed to be like a godly person, a Christian person. If you're not going to be honest with them, right? You're not going to be telling them the truth or whatever it is. Then who are you going to be true to, right? It's just, it comes down to something like as simple as that. Like, if you're going to say that you love somebody more than anybody else and you can't be counted on to be honest with them. Not in general about all these things. Like just, there should be somebody in the world that you can at least be faithful to. And it's not just about the sex and the cheating. It's about the whole thing. It's about the relationship. It's about, all of these things. And so let me find the part where he says how he's changed. So he says this here.
I may have been drinking, but I was cognizant enough to remember every single detail. And I'm not here to say that my conduct was good.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was bad, right? This is positive.
Being in a hotel room with someone that's, not the person you're with is not okay. I own up to that, and I've had to own up to that, and that's been difficult.
Yeah, haven't owned up to that because that's enough for you not to get the job. Like, this is about, you're a conservative person. It's the liberals who have diluted the standards, and Trump did it too. Like Trump, of course, Trump is banging porn stars and cheating on all of his wives and paying them off, like all this shit, right? Like, the thing that happened with Bill Clinton really wrecked the morality of America because Bill Clinton had sex with an 18-year-old girl, weird sex involving like cigars and shit, with an 18-year-old intern, cheating on his wife in his Oval Office at his job, and then lied about it, and then lied about it, and then was impeached, but they just let it go, and he just, he lasted it out. He outlasted it. It was totally a Me Too thing. And it was like, okay, presidents can do that now. Like, that should have been the end. Like, every other president before Bill Clinton, when I grew up, that was a huge scandal. I mean, Richard Nixon did next to nothing for Watergate. Like, he covered it up, but he really wasn't involved with, he had plausible deniability for something that really didn't affect the election or anything. Like, Nixon, the scandal was the lies. And it was such a huge scandal. Like, Watergate dominated my youth, and I barely watched the news. Like, I knew about it. I was a kid. I didn't give a shit about it. And so it was a big thing. And now, of course, it's come around in podcasts and all these other things. The intricacies of the thing. But, cheating on your spouses, especially when you got these important jobs, it should be a scandal like that gets rid of your chances, like eliminates you from the pool. It shows that Donald Trump is a bad, vetter. His team isn't vetting people. And that this guy, this isn't that long ago, and he has two problems here. He has a problem of cheating on his spouses, and he's supposed to be a Christian. And this is like Hunter Biden behavior. Like, if this was if this was a Democrat, they would try to end him on Fox and Megyn Kelly. That's the problem with these pseudo-truthers. Everyone should be held to the same standard. Right? Hunter Biden wouldn't be considered for defense secretary. Of course, he's got more severe problems with his crack addiction. But this guy's out. He's just cheated on his wife with his coworker, impregnated her. That's kicked off a bad divorce. His mom is, writing to him and, around this time and saying she's a piece of shit with poor character. Like, he knows, like, he had to change. He talked about how much he had to change, right? And so, people go through shit and people have problems. That's fine. Like, whatever his personal problems are, whatever he has to work out, that's between him and his God. I don't give a shit. I'm not here to judge those things. Like, I don't care. But you don't get to be defense secretary. Like, or whatever it is. Like, this should be the standard. If you want a standard of morality and you're a right-wing conservative Christian person, then you got to judge everybody the same way. Like, he's admitting he has a problem. Like, the behavior wasn't okay. And so this is what, it involved his job. This was all about his job, right? His behavior was at Fox News. He was just a commentator on some shitty little Fox show. Now he's going to be running the Defense Department, and how he conducted himself at his old job, showing up hungover and drunk or whatever it is, still breathing out alcohol, and being a problem there, womenizing with, his coworkers, and being with women and wives married, all this stuff. That's who he is as a person, right?
Difficult. And my wife's amazing, and she knew about it, but going through it again is not easy.
But she wasn't your wife then. You were getting divorced then, and she was your baby mama.
But ultimately, I went through that process with investigators, eyes wide open and honest, because I knew I had nothing to hide.
Okay, you had a lot to hide, right? Just it wasn't what she said. And again, we don't know about this other woman. We don't know if she's telling the truth or not. Like, this could be true, right? And so why take a risk on somebody like this? Like, you bring in drama and a mess into the Defense Department when we're already close to World War III, and you got Trump, who's a fucking nightmare, and you can't be trusted to make good decisions. Like, he picked this guy. Like, Trump should never have picked this guy. And he picked Matt Gaetz. And Kennedy, to whatever extent. And Kennedy is the one I believe would do the best job in terms of things he said in the past. I mean, Kennedy is his own piece of shit. He's not a truther. Whatever, he's got his own issues. But Kennedy believes in these things because he's been talking about them for years. Of course, Donald Trump had a meeting at McDonald's. And he picked 3 guys who aren't going to get passed through. They're not going to get confirmed. There's no way they're going to confirm Kennedy. I'd be shocked if they do. We'll see how that goes, right? But, these are bad choices. They're bad choices for a lot of reasons. Kennedy's the best choice out of all of them because he represents a change that, most of us agree he needs to happen in the healthcare system, in the food system. Whether he will get the job was, that's something else. But, you're picking Kennedy, who has a questionable past, and he's a womanizer and all these things. But this has been out for a while, right? And the scandals that these guys have, him and Matt Gaetz, and there's this frat boy element to both of them, right?
So that one we've dealt with. But then come the flurry of allegations about your personal life. And I think it's admitted, at least in your divorce proceedings, that you did cheat on your first 2 wives. You're on your 3rd marriage to Jen, a former colleague of my own at Fox, and yours too. And your hookup with this woman in Monterey happened when you were with Jen. So that's 3.
And it's still not divorced from his other wife, right? Who has 3 kids of his. So, again, this is about decision making. This is about a person bringing drama and frickin' personal behaviors into his workplace environment at Fox News. And now he's going to be in charge of women and, that are working with him at Defense Department, right? A person who is, a serial cheater and somebody who has an alcohol issue in a very stressful job, right? And he'd be in this powerful position where bad things come out. I've been talking about this quite a bit, like this idea of samskaras that people have. It happens for a lot of people who become spiritual people and saintly people, and they start becoming, worshipped by people. They become gods to people, and they lose their shit because, they have these tendencies from past lives or whatever they might be that are pulled out because they're now in, or somebody who's becomes a boss or becomes a multimillionaire, somebody becomes really successful, stars. You see what happens to celebrities. When people are given a privileged position where other people look up to them, where they're worshipped to some extent, they have a lot of fans, they have a lot of power, they have a lot of money, they have a lot of influence, and all of a sudden another side of them that no one knew existed. They could be the nicest people, just good qualities, and then something emerges from within that no one knew was there, and the person doesn't know how to deal with it. Past life tendencies and things that happen. And so when you're in a position of power, like I said, all these spiritual people have fallen. They're really into God. They're really into, they want to serve God, and then they start, getting popularity from people. People start following them, and the next thing you know, they fall. It happens all the time. And so, positions of power, where there are these tendencies that you could suppress when you just have a normal life, but then when you have, these situations where you're, whatever it is, like these various success stories, you have some success, and these tendencies now are, activated. And so he already has these tendencies. He's going to be in this position, and it's a very stressful position, right? Like all these positions are. And they're very, you don't have time to take a breath off when there's crises. And, he's relying on alcohol. Like anybody who's drinking, if this guy was using heroin, people think that alcohol is some benign because it's legal. Alcohol is a very powerful drug. And, so many people use it. It's in our culture, like all over the place, right? In TV shows and movies. But just like with anything else, it distorts your perception of reality, and you make bad decisions. How many times have you made a bad decision where alcohol was involved, right? And you're like, well, I can't use that as an excuse. Yeah, you can't because you made the decision to drink. But once you start drinking, your ability to make decisions and perceive reality is impaired. Like your alcohol impairs your reality. You're not supposed to drive when you're drinking. It impairs your ability to drive. What other things does it impair? Well, all across the board, right? People make bad decisions when they drink. So.
Right. And there are a lot of women at home and men who will be like, it's a no, right? He's too much of a serial cheater. Like, how can we put a guy in this position?
I'm glad she's asking this question, at least, again. It's a legitimate question.
Who's a serial cheater? So is that a fair characterization of you?
I think it was a fair characterization of me before I truly was changed by Jen and my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And I mean that. I mean, people cannot believe that if they don't want to. But if you look at me and if you know me.
Yeah, but what if, like, Hunter Biden said the same thing? Would people accept that? If someone on the left accepted that. Also, there's people who say that, and it's true for the time being, and then these tendencies emerge again. And so, and this is his saying that his wife changed him, but he was already with her for a period of time, right? So she had his baby, he's dating her, again, his third wife, and he's saying she changed him, but not before these allegations came out. And, this, and then realizing that you have these tendencies, right? And it might not work for you to be in a position like this. Like, I understand my limitations. Like, I'm not a good supervisor. I'm not a good administrator. Like, I don't do well being in charge of people. Like, people said, Paul for president, and I'm like, no, I'd make a shitty president. I mean, aside from, even if the system wasn't corrupt. Like, in this case, it's not even the question, right? But, like, why would I be a good president? Like, because I sit here on my bed and talk shit with my two dogs, and I'm good at it. Like, I'm good at, understanding things and articulating things and perceiving things. But, that's not anything to do with the job of being, like, I would make a good mayor, right? I don't have those capabilities. I'm not somebody who has, like, you're just knowing, what your tendencies are. And this guy's tendencies aren't good, right?
If you have watched us walk into Colts Neck Community Church and Pilgrim Hill Reformed Fellowship, the churches where we've attended, that have truly, I'll never forget a sermon that my pastor gave, Pastor Chris, who's a dear friend of mine, where he talked about most people miss Jesus by 12 inches from their head to their heart. I grew up as a Christian. My mom was on Fox and Friends. She's wonderful Christian parents. I intellectually was associated with it and understood it, but never really.
Okay, so look, I don't want to question the guy's Christianity and his commitment to this, but we know that, that hasn't been enough for lots of people. There's all these pastors, there's all these priests, there's all these, religious people who sincerely believe in, Jesus and the Bible, and maybe it's some bullshit or whatever, that still do bad things, right? And so, your faith can help you change, but that isn't going to, like, there's enough evidence on this guy. I'm glad they finally, I got to the bottom. I'm hearing, how he changed, right? Like, this is his saying, he went through this process. But, the person he was before isn't gone. I mean, that person can reemerge, right? It just takes, like, I was saying this in a recent video, it doesn't take much to break somebody. Like, you could be on top of the world, everything going great, and within a week, I talked about this woman. I worked in an outpatient clinic treatment center in New Mexico, and I had to pick up clients. It was people who are usually wealthy and successful. It was an expensive place, and people would go with addictions and psychological issues to this place in New Mexico. It wasn't a good place, but this is the services of the place. And I had to pick people up, and I was getting my master's in counseling, so I was as part of, I'd worked in places like this, different kinds of treatment centers, right, with young sex offenders and other things for kids. But this is for rich people. Some of them were like semi-famous, and they were people that you knew the family had wealth, generational wealth and things. And so there's a woman who was a judge, and I went to pick her up at the airport, and she had been addicted to crack. She didn't show up. She didn't get on the plane, or she didn't get off the plane, or she didn't, whatever happened, she didn't emerge so that I could drive her to the treatment center. And in her intake, she had been a judge, respected member of the community. She started smoking crack and blew through all of her savings, and within a short period of time was prostituting herself so she could get money to buy crack. She had a family, and her job was done, or family was, I was maybe trying to save her or whatever it was. And she didn't, you're supposed to come to this treatment center, she couldn't even make it there, right? Like, this happens to people all the time. And so, the stuff that this guy did should have been like, well, this is going to come up, and there's a very contentious environment. And they've been so judgmental of Hunter Biden and people like that, right? If this was a Democrat, there would be no tolerance. Megyn Kelly and the rest of the people, the behaviors wouldn't, attitudes wouldn't be the same. You're supposed to take this guy's word for it that he changed, and we don't know how long, it's been since he had his last drink in reality. And what happens when he starts drinking again, right? And maybe he's committed to being a Christian for now. Maybe this is true, maybe it isn't. And so, you don't have to hire somebody like this. You can hire, there's plenty of people who aren't serial cheaters and don't have a problem with alcohol that would do a better job, right? Like, it's not like you have to have this guy. It's just the guy Trump picked who doesn't have any experience doing the job, right? He's not really qualified.
Lived it. And it was those moments in those places in my relationship with Jen as we grew together in Christ that I become a changed man. Am I a perfect man? No. Was I a perfect man? Absolutely not.
Okay, so nobody wants perfection, but there's a guy who couldn't show up at work for Fox News without being hungover, breathing out alcohol, right? Couldn't show up on time, banging one of his coworkers, cheating on his wife. This is his last job, right? And so running he's not qualified. He's not. He's got to run some big agency, right? And I hope he has changed. I hope he's religion's working for him. I mean, I always support people's connection to God, and divinity is the best way to change. But the Christian system, the religion, doesn't have a lot of ways for people to change. Like, you can change your attitude, you can devote yourself to the teachings, but in terms of the samskaras, or the patterns of behavior, there's things that's available in, psychological treatment, and I'm not a big fan of those. It works to some extent, and there's a 12-step programs and these other things, right? And so the guy, his mom said he's been redeemed, he's a changed man, and he says it, and that's great, but he doesn't get to be defense secretary. It's just, there's a standard here. Just because he says Jesus changed me, then anybody can say that. What if Hunter Biden said that? You guys don't care about that. You're all whining about the pardons. Joe Biden says his son has changed. He's a changed man. Also because of woman. He's in another relationship. He's just had a kid. Similar things. Very similar to Hunter Biden. You have to hold everybody to the same standards. Anyways, let's move on to this last thing here.
We interrupt programming for breaking news from NBC Chicago.
Good morning to you. I'm Marion Brooks, and we are breaking into programming for some serious breaking news.
Serious breaking news.
The CEO of United Healthcare, Brian Thompson, was shot and killed this morning in Midtown Manhattan in what appears to be a targeted attack.
Okay, so this was like an assassination you'd see in a movie. And I don't know how many of these things happen that we don't know about, because there are murders that happen every day that aren't covered. But this guy was a CEO of United Healthcare, a big company. He was in near a hotel in Manhattan. He was walking down the street, some guy in a mask with a silencer came up and shot him in the back, and then shot him multiple times, John Wick style. Jumped on a cycle and got out of there. And as far as I know, as of today, hasn't been identified yet. I haven't looked at the news yet. So as of yesterday. But, this story was going on the same thing at the same time as Pete Hegseth stories going on, right? And, the issues here are, this happened in broad daylight on the streets of Manhattan. And it's a big person, a CEO of a, big company or whatever it is, right? And so, I don't know how much I'm going to cover this, but there's video out on it and all these things. But it's almost like these things are surreal. Like things are just happening like that. Like just on this, why is this guy targeted in broad daylight? There's video footage of the incident. Like it's pretty fucked up. Okay, so I just ate breakfast and I went around the news channels. And they were all talking, two of the stations were talking about Pete Hegseth. I don't remember what Fox was talking about the national debt going over $36 trillion, which I'll cover in my next video. Because, it's a significant number and they're talking about it in the news. But first, let me just show you this here.
The fighting in between the services. The guy talked about how the Marines were the heroes. He goes, Navy, they're pretty good. The Army, they do their best. The Air Force, hell, sometimes I wonder if they're even on our side. That's how intense the intramural, and Mike's laughing because he knows. It is, you're dealing with 1,000 different things coming at you at the same time. And Pete Hegseth is not equipped to do that, even with all of the other character issues that people have been talking about for the past 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's not just about managing the Army-Navy game in a couple of weeks. It's far more than that. Mike, you also alluded to a moment ago this idea that Trump perhaps was not being well served by his vetting process. Trump himself kind of suggested that on Truth Social yesterday. He was pushing back against a Wall Street Journal report that suggested that you could see it here, that the DA pick pulled out. And he said, quote, I'll read from this. He didn't pull out. I pulled him out because I did not like what he said to my pastors and other supporters. Now, we should note that happened in 2020. That's public knowledge, this incident that he's talking about where a DEA, his nominee for DEA while sheriff in Florida, actually was enforcing COVID restrictions and alienated some on the right.
Okay, so let's go back to this here. He has, he said, besides he didn't pull out, I pulled him out because I didn't like what he said to my pastor and other supporters. But more importantly, with my latest setback, what's my latest setback? I just won presidency of the United States. They haven't written a good story about me in years. Somebody over there ought to look at what they're doing. The only worse than them is stupid China-centric Forbes magazine. And, because he was talking about how obnoxious the Wall Street Journal was. How triggered Trump gets. But the problem here is he's picking people, and there are either issues which is going to make them hard to get passed through, right? Or he himself has issues with them because his vetting process sucks. Like if he didn't vet this guy properly, if this guy was pushing for closing down things for COVID, which is a big no-no for right-wing people and Trump himself, and now he's realizing it, like he doesn't know who the fuck he's picking, right? This is part of the problem.
My pastors and other supporters. Now, we should note that happened in 2020. That's public knowledge, this incident that he's talking about where a DEA, his nominee for DEA while sheriff in Florida, actually was enforcing COVID restrictions and alienated some on the right. We are seeing here that his transition team has been blindsided by a few of these choices, which has set up people like not just Pete Hegseth, not just Matt Gaetz, but Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and that's allowed some Republican senators to say no. Do you think that trend's going to continue?
I think it is, but, when Gates got shot down, Trump didn't go after the senators, which I think was smart. But if Hegseth goes down, the senators are going to start thinking, how many of these people can we take away before Trump's looking weak and incompetent? And Trump will be feeling that instantly. His survival instinct is nothing to sneeze at. So you worry about the Kash Patel's vote at OMB, one of the most powerful agencies. He is a competent, real hardcore guy. So it's like giving somebody the KGB over. That is a powerful agency. And then Tulsi, in the intelligence community, which doesn't like to share with the White House to begin. If she's DNI, they're having an excuse not to share at all. They're wondering how many vetoes the senators think they have before Trump explodes and they have problems. You got 22 Republican senators up next year. In 2 years. 2/3 of the senators who are up out of 33. They don't want primaries. So
I have something more profound I want to share with people. Let me just, finish up with this stuff with Hegseth and Trump's appointing of people. And so when you're bringing in outsiders, like you're trying to be a change agent, you're changing something. And, you have these people who are controversial. and they're not a part of the club, right? Whenever you're bringing new people into a club type situation, these people need to be like impeccable characters. They have to be of a higher standard. Like if you want to bring truthers into a situation like with mainstream, there's one thing to be on the internet where the internet is just, this massive thing, but there's no regulation. There's no, there's no old boys network. There's no, sort of, structure there of, some sort of, hierarchy of a social order and things. And so, bringing people that are truthers onto mainstream media hasn't worked because mainstream media wants to make you into one of them, right? And so all these people who have, whoever are like kind of truther adjacent, truther type people, someone like the guy in the Young Turks who's, very hyper liberal. He's not really a truther, but, more of a woke type person. And he went on to MSNBC and got good ratings. And yet they kept on telling him he couldn't say certain things or whatever. So he ended up leaving, right? He said, the guy talked about Cenk Iyengar, about, having the conversation. They had the conversation. They had the handlers are telling him, and they're trying to mold him into one of them. And as soon as they do that, you lose your ratings and your edge. I was talking about this with Brian Stelsa. And so if Trump wants to bring in outsiders and a new wave of people, he wants to take down the old guard, you have to bring in people who can withstand the extra scrutiny and the hostility they're going to get. We all know it. We all know as truthers, what the system and everyone's trying to do is to break you and send you and make you go back into the matrix and become a sheeple again. Your family and, you got all these people in your life. I mean, now it's not so, prevalent, but when us old school people, when there's less of us, and before that it was so secret, people who were truthers wouldn't even share it with most people. They wouldn't share I'm talking about before the big event, 2001, before the internet. People like my brother, you couldn't say things to lots of people because they would look at you in some, kind of way. You couldn't share it at work, these things. And so it was a completely underground movement. And then when it started to blossom on the internet, people still are very hesitant to talk about it in their other parts of their life. They'll talk about it on the internet with some anonymous name, pseudo kind of, just anonymity and some kind of, alternate personality that goes out and leaves comments and truther type of setups and, whatever on social media and watches truther stuff. But there's lots of people who are just lurkers and they don't buy into the official story anymore, but they don't tell people about it. And if they do, it's a very mild way, right? Because the whole system wants you to not be that, right? And people from, like I said, old school people that were doing this in the 90s and 2000s and things like this, early 2000s, I mean 2010, up to 2010 when it was just becoming something on the internet, the pushback was quite palpable. And so if you want to bring in outsiders to something, they can't have all this baggage that they can prejudice against you. I talked about this with Alex Jones. Alex Jones. Alex Jones was such a piece of shit in terms of his fake persona that he did. And he went on that Piers Morgan interview and looked like a crazy person, right? And you can't be that way when they're trying to say to everybody, they're creating a profile of truthers, of right-wing, crazy, unhinged people. And Alex Jones is a right-wing, crazy, unhinged person. So he fit, because he's a shill, but he fit into their narrative perfectly, right? Like you have to be better than the people who are on mainstream media. You can't have, worse tendencies. You can't be the ammunition they need to demonize you, right? And so when Trump does things, he just does them without any sort of nuance or sophistication or any. It's like he's not a surgeon. Trump is a blunt instrument, and he's just used to being okay for him because of his his whole life. He's never had to be delicate or these things. Like he's just kind of a thug in his way that he goes about things. And he's arrogant, this frat boy thing that these guys all have, thinking they know more and this, attitude. But, he's picked all these people that are deeply flawed. And the system doesn't want them in the first place and is looking for an excuse to prejudice against the people or person. and expel them and not let them into the club, right? This is these exclusive clubs. This guy, Jackie Robinson, he was the first black baseball player. Very interesting story. I'm sure there's documentaries about him. I've seen some of this stuff, older stuff. But he was a person of like impeccable temperament and character because, he was coming into the white baseball league and there was all this prejudice and racism back then. And they would shout the N-word at him, right? They had these so-called Negro leagues where they had black baseball players playing, in a segregated league, right? And white players, in the white league, black players weren't allowed to play. So just, to understand how bad racism was, back then. It's 1947, so, 1947. So, that's World War II. That's not that long ago. I mean, this is about 20 years, 17 years before I was born, right? So I grew up, there was black players in all the major sports, but back then there was none. I mean, think about this, right? This is 1947. This is, slavery got abolished in the 1800s, right? So, this is over 100 years after slavery, and they didn't let black players play in major league sports. And now, of course, we don't even think about it. Of course, we grew up with it. Many of you who are younger than me, but there was this prejudice, and the guy was getting abused. They were throwing things at him, calling him the N-word, threatening his life, threatening his family, and the guy just didn't say a thing. He didn't react. And players look bad when they go after fans. But you have no idea what the fans are doing. The fans can get quite abusive, right? And it can build and be, not just the fans, but it's reporters and the media. And I mean, you think of the scrutiny this guy went through, and he never reacted. He never got angry. He never acted out in a way that they could demonize him. Like he had to be that guy. He had to be like a saint almost, someone who just was able to turn the other cheek and take all the abuse that's being thrown at him, so that he could break through and, there could be more black players in the future. Like he had to be a person of a significant, temperament and character. And that's how you have to be if you're somebody trying to change something. You're being, an outsider brought into a situation. And Trump has all these people with major character flaws, right? And so, what they were saying here, these reporters on Morning Joe, again, I don't call them reporters, these, piece of shit on Morning Joe, they have valid points here from their perspective and from the perspective of the establishment that these senators don't want to let any of these Trump people in. But they have a situation where, Trump's going to get mad at them if they reject too many of his people. Again, I don't have a problem with Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr., but RFK Jr. has significant character issues, and he has big pharma against him. And so, this is different than the rest of these guys. I don't know if there's any agencies out there that are against Pete Hegseth. I don't know if there's military-industrial complex lobbyists against Pete Hegseth, because if there was, he'd be done. I don't know who was against Matt Gaetz in terms of these powerful agencies. But Big Pharma can withdraw their funds from these various senators and support their competition. And so, RFK Jr. is almost like there's just no way. And then he has his character issues, and he's been demonized, right? And, these things that he did by cheating on his wife 36 times in 1 year, RFK Jr., and then documenting it in a journal or diary that his wife found out about and she committed suicide. He says he's got all these skeletons in his closet. Well, that precludes you from being a change agent, right? If you want to be one of these people who's about change, you have to just be better. You have to be on a higher level. And, the other part of this is, what the truth community started off as, there was people who understood the left-right paradigm. And they weren't, they might have started off as Democrats and Republicans, but they no longer were supporting either side. They realized that the whole thing's controlled. The whole thing's a deep state. And that was the majority of people, including Alex Jones to some extent. Alex Jones talked about the right-left paradigm. He certainly leaned right, leaned Republican, and most of his supporters were Republican, right? But then the QBs came in, the flat earthers came in, all these disgruntled Republicans came in, and they wrecked the truth community. And if you guys are part of that, you wrecked the truth community. because it's not been as good since then, because you guys have brought it down to a lower level of consciousness. And you've hijacked something that the rest of us all contribute into building, especially on YouTube and these places. You've brought in censorship because you've brought the crazy, especially the Cubies, and people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and all these people are now the face of these, the truther narratives. And it's become a right-wing thing instead of we don't believe in either party. We don't believe in either, left or right, or the left-right paradigm. We believe that this whole system is rigged against the whole system is an illusionary, lie-based system. It's all bullshit, right? And it's controlled by the same people. The left and the right are controlled by the same people. And we want to think that there's distinction. Some people do, because you want to vote or whatever. But there's no changing it politically or any other way. The system can only break. Like it can only there's no it can only be destroyed at this point. There's no fixing it. And you can whatever. I mean, everyone's got their different way of dealing with it, but also it's very fragile. And so you can't bring in outsiders who think they're going to change the system when they can't, especially coming from a right-wing perspective. And so, all this stuff that we've built up over the years as truthers, the right-wing truthers have come in and hijacked this. And so instead of putting in real change agents, and again, you can't change the government, so the whole thing's silly, but these people who, pretend to be truthers, this guy Hegseth is one of them, Matt Gaetz and like Marjorie Taylor Greene, these other people, people Trump is appointing, some of them are QBs or former QBs or, whatever they do. They believe in the Trump bullshit. Then they believe in the Trump lies about his fake assassination attempt and all these things. And all the Trumpers who are now polluting the truth community, believing that Trump is going to change the things that can't be changed and that they believe in his lies and that he cares about them. Some of them believe him. He's like the reincarnation of, he's a second coming of Jesus. I mean, there's people who believe that shit, right? But you've invaded something that we were creating that was so much better before you guys came into it. Like all the QBs, all the Trumpers, all the stuff. It wasn't great. It was like, it wasn't going anywhere. But now you've taken it in a direction where, real change can't happen because you guys aren't willing to look at your own indoctrination of your religion, of your right-wing Republican bullshit, all your stuff. The fact that we're an evil empire, the military-industrial complex, all the things. If you're not willing to look at all of it, then you're not really a truther, and you're just still a sheeple in truther clothing, right? And so that's, what's happening with Pete Hegseth and all these people. They're not real change agents. They're not really, whatever he called the disruptors. They're not any of those things. They're just a new version of the right wing that's just more radical and more stupid. So I want to get into the spiritual stuff here. I also want to include this in the Journey series. I was just doing these special videos on on the Gratefullness meditation channel, and these techniques that we're given. I'm rereading this preceptor book, and it just struck me how much the Sajmark system, there is techniques and ways for people to get rid of undesirable tendencies. Just did a video of these techniques that people who have a sexual addiction or people with deviant sexual tendencies, or they can't free themselves from their sexual, thoughts and desires or whatever it is, right? And there are techniques there in the Sajmark system, and they were given in like the 1950s or 60s. So a lot of stuff has happened. Of course, the level of porn and these kids are growing up with all these deviant sexual proclivities, all the stuff that's being pushed on, this Hollywood morality, all the things that we now know, right? All this twisted stuff. And all these things that would be considered deviant behaviors and attitudes and thoughts, there's ways that people have to psychologically help people with this. I mean, now, of course, the psychological model is embracing these things as normal. All these various ways that people have these deviant tendencies. And it goes far beyond sex and sexual identity and things like this. Because most people can't control their mind and their thoughts. Like how many people wish they wouldn't think the things they did. They wish they wouldn't feel the things they feel. And oftentimes it gets in the way of their success, and they can't stop themselves from compulsive thoughts and from many of you have suffered from this or know people suffer from, they just self-sabotage and they just can't help themselves, right? there's people like this in your life. Maybe you're one of them. It sucks for other people, but where you go somewhere and you know that there's a couple people in your family, if you're a parent, could be your kids or a group of people, a group of friends or something, that can't be trusted to behave in a reasonable and rational way. Like they'll freak out or they'll get into fucking drama and they'll start arguments and fights at places and, they're just not, they can't behave in a civilized manner. They'll attack you or attack other people. You never know when they're going to flip out. Like they just aren't, they're not quality companions. They're not good people to have in your life. If you have kids like this, you're constantly waiting for them to spaz out and have a tantrum or something, or they're just, if you have a spouse like this or whatever, or friends, family members, maybe you're a kid in a family like this and your dad's an alcoholic, your mom, and they're just always, you're hoping that everyone can just get along for like a vacation and, the first day goes okay and then something happens and they snap and they just can't let things go. They can't, take the higher, they just always got to spaz out and get emotional and bring drama and people like this. And there are more and more people like this who are so fragile. I mean, they're freaking out. All the people that freaked out when Trump was elected, they lose their minds screaming and yelling and having complete meltdowns and spazzing out and just flipping out. And they just can't deal with life. Whatever happens, people would go do the opposite, just shut down and check out. And they can't deal with whatever's going around. They disappear like, from crises when you need their support. The spouse who just withdraws and you feel like you're on your own because you can't, it's all these things. People just short out and glitch out and they can't do what they need to do. And then, of course, there's addictions and all the stuff I was talking about, sexual proclivities, sexual perversions, and just not being able to control your thoughts and your emotions, right? Where you're dominated by, whatever has happened to you in the world triggers things in you and it makes you behave in ways you don't want to behave. And you just fall apart. Either you get angry or you get fearful or you just panic attacks or you get, angry, violent outbursts, or you can't keep yourself from saying things that are going to get you fired, or you can't keep your mouth closed. You're just all these things. People wishing they had more control over their mind and more control over their emotions and their behaviors. And, they go into the psychological community. They go get counseling or they do it with religions. And, they get to a 12-step program for their addictions. And these things can work depending on how bad someone wants to actually change. But there's actually real techniques that work in the Sizemore system, right? I was lucky enough the way I came into the system, I was such an incompetent person, such an underachieving person. I knew my way wasn't working, right? Like I knew that, what I was doing and the way I perceived the world and, my personality and, my beliefs and things like this, it just wasn't working. I didn't believe in anything. I could barely, I was barely functioning. I wasn't maturing into it took me 3 times to get through college, 3 tries at college. All these things. Couldn't sustain relationships, couldn't hold jobs. I was, under functioning. And I had talents and abilities that weren't being utilized correctly, just lost, nothing to believe in. And so I had such a profound spiritual experiences at the beginning of the Sizemore system. Other people haven't, don't get those kind of experiences. Everything just broke right for me. And I started to read the philosophy and then contemplate some of the teachings. And it was things I never thought about before. Some of the things, I didn't necessarily agree with and weren't things that I even understood at first, right? But I was willing to give it a try because I knew what I was doing wasn't working. And so I tested out the various techniques that help people change, the meditative techniques, the cleaning process, some of these other things. And I tested out the philosophy, and it proved to be true over and over again for me. The idea of samskaras, the idea that you have these tendencies and impressions from past experiences that dominate your present, right? Your past dominating your present, and you're creating your future right now in your present. That's going to affect you, who you are, and what you do in the future. And the actions and thoughts and attitudes you have now are going to manifest themselves into a future that probably in more cases than not is not to your liking, right? And so the need to change those things and regulate those things and regulate your mind and be able to and help balance out your system so you get control over your emotions and your thought process, your thinking process. And when you find that your mind is going in a direction that isn't in your best interest, and you find your emotions leading you down a negative path, and oftentimes people change reality. They change the facts to fit their feelings. And you see this pretty much with every group. Their emotional standpoint on something, their beliefs warp reality to make Trump a hero when he's clearly not. They need a hero, and they have these feelings, and they're frustrated, and Trump addresses those. He speaks to those emotions. He speaks to those beliefs, even though he doesn't believe in him. And people are so desperate to have a hero, a champion for their beliefs, that they get behind Trump or Biden or whatever. You see it all the time. And they're desperate people who are rearranging reality and making Trump or Biden into better people than they actually are, or demonizing them, making them worse than they actually are, because that's how they feel. It's based on their emotions. And so they're warping reality. It's what people do. And so people have difficulty seeing the world the way it is objectively, because they are prejudiced and they are skewed, and everyone has a lens in which they view reality that is distorted. And the Sizemore system helps to alleviate all those things, but only if you want it to happen. And these techniques have been given for years, and I've seen so many people, not use them, whatever it is, whether it's the cleaning process, whether it's these special type of, sittings and techniques that you can use. People just don't want to give up on those things. They want to have their perversions. They want to have their distortions in reality. They want to lie to themselves. They want to, they can't, there's like crutches that they can't give up. They can't allow to be changed, right? And I was in a unique position from the standpoint that I was fully convinced what I was and what I believed and what I had on the inside wasn't working. And so I was willing to give something else a shot, and at least try it out, even if I didn't agree with everything. And so, the principles and the things that are taught in the Sizemore system, and a lot of them I talk about here, are things that aren't coming from me, and things aren't specific to me, but they're just the teachings the way I understand them. And they make sense to people. Like, some of the things I'm talking about here, people think are coming from me, and they're, years of training, or there's a channeling aspect, and they're coming through, a divine, being a conduit for divine information coming from divinity to pass through me. Now, every conduit is going to be somewhat skewed. You're never going to be perfectly objective, right? But you can be a conduit. And, when I say things here, I know them to be true, but they're not necessarily things that I agree with personally, or I don't like them to be that way, right? Like, I'm not psyched about the system coming down. The older I get, the harder it is to imagine surviving a collapse of the system. But deep down, I know it's what's best, right? And so you can have these two things. You can have, what you know to be the truth and what you want to be the truth, right? Like, everyone has to balance that, but you have to be aware of those two things. You have to be honest with yourself. Like, in terms of, this is the truth, but I wish the truth was this. And most people just can't do that. Like, it is not available to them, or they don't think about it that way. Just admitting that what is the truth isn't to your liking. What God really isn't to your liking, right? Because all these religions have distorted God's teachings. Like for Christianity, the original teachings of Jesus, the Old Testament's a piece of shit, should just not even exist. I don't know what it was originally, but it's just so bad now it can't be salvaged. But Jesus' teaching, especially like the idea of the kingdom of heaven is within, and some of these things, the purity of those teachings, they have been distorted because people don't want to hear the truth. Like, that's why they killed the guy, right? I mean, they killed the guy because he was he was saying the truth. I mean, that's, think about that, like a spiritual truth. And they killed all his disciples. All of them were murdered in horrific ways, tortured them. They were all tortured for telling the truth, not even killed. I mean, you can have a mercy killing, especially for a spiritual person. They get taken off the planet if they've reached a certain level. It's like a mercy killing, because then they don't have to deal with all this bullshit from the people that aren't going to rise up to their, to their whatever their, their essence of their message. It's always a frustration for spiritual people. that the people who they're talking to not only won't rise up to it, but oftentimes will turn on them. You know, they're giving these people divine information, but people are rejecting it because people have God inside of them, and God's communicating with you all the time, and God's there. Your ability to see the world through God's eyes is there, but you're not taking it. Like, people just don't embrace it. They don't want it. And so, like I'm saying, you know, there can be a great system, a perfect system. There can be a system of change to help people change, but people don't want to change. There's been divine system. There's been divine beings. There's been higher developed souls. And people have rejected them over and over again. And so at some point, it's going to be like, fuck you guys, you're a waste. We've given you as many opportunities as we could, and that's going to be it for the human race. Like, we're close to that time, right? And I'm not saying that as some kind of warning or foreboding. It's just what it is. And, you know, we haven't seen what's going to happen when people, there's a post-apocalyptic situation. We haven't seen it what it's going to be like when there's been significant population reduction and a drastic change in lifestyle. And this, you know, this idea that we fucked ourselves, like, that's going to be there. Like, people realize we did this to ourselves. You know, the people of the future and, you know, even, you know, whatever people who survive what's about to happen. And we'll see what people will do with that, right? Will they change or not? Like, will they, you know, desire to be redeemed in some real way? Not this, you know, stuff that, you know, people say, oh, I found God, and you're better for a little bit, or whatever it is, or then you go back to your old tendencies. Because the majority of systems out there don't have ways of cleaning out your past samskaras, your addictions and your deviant behaviors and your negative thoughts and the hate and the anger and the fear that's inside of you. You know, this can be cleaned out in the Sajmark system. But I've seen over and over again, people reject the cleaning. They don't like it. They feel uncomfortable without these things that they've been around with them. So it gets cleaned out, but they can't wait to recreate it. They get all the hatred cleaned out of their system, and yet they find a way to recreate it. They get all the anger, all the, you know, deviant thoughts, all the negativity that's in their system, and they can't wait to bring it back in because they don't feel comfortable being on a higher level. They're comfortable with all the deviations and all the proclivities of their ego they're quite different from the purity of their soul. And that's just the reality. And like, it's for all of us. You know, people have a hard time embracing their higher nature. It's there, and we do it. We flirt with it. We touch upon it at different times. But for the most part, people don't. And, you know, it's a sad thing, but it's just the way it is. And if things don't change in some, you know, capacity in the future, there isn't some, you know, because there's so much potential that human beings have that's going unrealized and unembraced. And if that goes on for a long period of time, it becomes a failed experiment. It becomes something where, you know, whatever our origin stories and whatever the excuses that are there, you know, it's being created to be slaves and all these things that go along with that. I mean, there's lots of excuses. But if you don't evolve, like you see this with every animal, if you don't adapt, you don't adjust, you don't evolve into something higher, and I'm talking mostly on the spiritual level, but all of it, if you don't do that, and you go down and you go get degraded and you become like a golem, like, you know, with these orcs and things in the Lord of the Rings movies and TV show, you know, whatever those things are, you know, these abominations of what used to be something that was great, right? We're descending into idiocracy and we're going in the wrong fucking direction. As long as that happens, your species can't be allowed to continue doing damage to the whole, going against God's will, you know, creating your own nightmares. I mean, everyone creating their own internal nightmares that, in terms of their internal world and what's inside of themselves, and then that manifesting into bad shit on the outside. And so there's no governmental fix. There's no, you know, corporate fix. There's no religious fix. It's people just wanting to be better and go to a higher level and embrace the divinity within them. I mean, it's a very simple answer. And there are systems. There's a system out there that can help people do that. But people don't want it. And, you know, what happened with the Sajmark system and this guy, this clown Dodgy, who had every reason to believe in the system and had all the benefits of the system. And the guy's just an absolute piece of shit, right? Like, you know, this, I mean, it's hard for me to even, you know, it was hard for me to imagine this thing happening, but it did. And so it just cemented in me this idea that people just won't rise up to a higher level, no matter what happens. And again, the circumstances might be different in the future, and it might take some generations, and hopefully that's the case. But right now, it's, you have people who dabble in it. You have higher developed souls that come down, and they do well for a while, but then they get sucked into the depravity of everyone else is doing, and it's just there's a fall, a spiritual fall. And, people want to embrace their lower nature. And when that changes, it changes. And if it doesn't change for some extended period of time, humanity will just be erased from history. And like at this point, it would be like kind of a mercy killing, right? Because, it's getting harder and harder to be a human being. You see it with each generation. These kids today, 60% of them are depressed. Most of them are on medication. The whole thing is an absolute mess. So anyways, there's always, like I said, the possibility for change. It's just when people choose it. Because there's always a pathway to the higher nature. There's always a pathway to God. But it's not some religious bullshit deal that you're getting that if you're going to go to heaven if you do a certain whatever it is. It's day-to-day change and working hard to be, embrace your soul, embrace the divinity within you, and make the choices that your ego doesn't want to make. Minimizing your egotistical tendencies, purifying yourself and going to a higher level and embracing the best part of you. And, people, like I said, just don't want to do that. All of us. I'm not talking about like I've done it. Like, it's something I dabble in. And like I said, we don't grade on a curve just because, like, let's say I'm the top 90%. Let's say I'm in the top 90% or even more than that. Like, even if I was in the top 99%, well, that doesn't mean, it just means I'm better than everyone else who sucks, right? Like if humanity sucks 100%, right? And there's some breakthroughs of people who are doing well in that, in that percentile. There's a lowest 1% and there's the highest 100%. That doesn't mean the higher 100% are doing great. It just means they're doing better than, it's like being in a prison environment and you're just better behaved than all the other prisoners, but you're still a criminal, right? And so like it's never about comparing yourself to other people. You could do that, to boost yourself up once in a while, but it's always, what's the highest I could be, right? What's the highest level you could reach? And that's, the way that everyone should look at it, not grading on a curve. Well, at least I'm better than that asshole over there, or these assholes over here. Yeah, but are you at your best, right? Am I at my best? No. Like it's, how far along are you? You're 50% there, or are you not even, is it less than 1%? Like how much are people able to express of their higher nature? Like people all do it. Even the lowest level people have moments of like compassion and empathy and, all those things, right? So like I said, I was gifted with something where the circumstances of my levels of incompetence as a human being and just, like at a point where I realized that I had to be better, or something had to change, that I wasn't functioning like I should. And getting the experience that I had of the Sajmark system, which was this, brilliant system that changed people, helped people change themselves, and change people on a spiritual level, cleaning things out and getting experiences of divinity through the transmission process, that I had an experience of it like most people don't get when they come into the system. A convincing experience where I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. And then, trying out all these different beliefs and, these different teachings, not beliefs, teachings and, attitudes and, behaviors. Like an example would be when I played sports, I was told being hard was a good thing and being soft was being weak. If somebody called you a softie, you were supposed to like fight them, right? It's like it was like a kind of the ultimate insult. Like when you hear people talk about athletes being soft, it's a real insult. But having a killer instinct and, being a killer, being a sociopath and crushing your opponent is very highly regarded. And when I started to read the Sajmark system about having a soft heart and being compassionate, being somebody who, America is, we don't surrender, we fight, Yeah, but you're fighting for something that's wrong. You're fighting for some beliefs and shit that isn't a good thing for you or anybody else, right? And you're killing people that are trying to help you change. You're killing people who are trying to change a system that needs to be changed. And this is what's happened to one saint, one spiritual person after another. Like people who have soft hearts do really poorly in our culture, American culture, European culture. I mean, they try to beat the shit out of you, right? Like try to make you into a hardened, sociopathic, negative person that doesn't give a shit about other people, doesn't feel things that other people are going through. It doesn't have compassion for other people. You don't feel things on a heart level that, other people are going through. Like you can feel, you can see people through a lens of compassion or whatever. I mean, it sounds like I'm in terms of my videos, I'm mocking people and all these things, but, I have a sense of what they're going through or what they are, and I know how hard it is to be a human being now, and, all of these things, right? That's why, like I said, it's not how I feel about them, but the stuff that I mock is certainly true. It's mockable, but, everyone's fucking struggling, and it's painful to watch, right? Like, it's painful to watch people just suck so fucking bad. Not because, like, I'm so much better than them, but just, you could see their suckiness, right? Like, it's just, they're just horrible people that's lying to themselves and pushing, selling their souls for absolutely fucking nothing, right? For, like, some, like, minor league, I mean, like, things that they don't even enjoy. And selling themselves out to a system or a corporation, a government, a medical system, and lying and forcing their lies on people just to make money that they don't even enjoy and have, things in their lives, material things that they don't even use and all this stuff, right? And it's just, it's pathetic and it's sad and it's, and there's nothing that can change it. But having some softness in your internal world and feeling things is painful. Like it's fucking painful to see what's going on and feel it on a heart level, right? That's why people build up defense mechanisms. But this idea, that I was given about being hard and being soft, and now all of a sudden I was doing something that softens your heart. The Sajmark system softens your heart where you start feeling things maybe you don't want to feel and you didn't even know you could feel. And you feel like when I would say something, mean or hurtful, which I did and, still do, when I would say something and I would feel how that made the other person feel. I could feel their heart, right? It was a real bummer. Like it was a real bummer that, the reality of how I was being, how, my personality and the things that I said and how it affected other people. And like I had to realize I had to change and adjust myself because I could feel the damage I was doing and the pain I was causing by saying things in a mean way and, in an indelicate way. Even if I was telling people the truth, I had to do it in a way that was, more nuanced with some sense of, what people were able to accept and were able to feel, right? I couldn't say it you can't just announce the harsh, brutal truth to people who are all in denial about whatever you're about to tell them, right? Which it becomes just an overwhelm for them because, they now have to deal with the fact that they're lying to themselves and they can't do that. And that's why people get butthurt. I mean, even what I do here, people take what I say personally because deep down they know what I'm saying is truthful, but they can't deal with it, right? They can't deal with it. And so they react in some way, they go after, they kill the messenger, whatever it is. They get upset, they lash out because they're just, so oblivious to their own bullshit. And when somebody calls them on it, they can't deal with it, right? And so, this is where we are as a society, where people are all deluding themselves. And, if you're working as being a so-called truther, then you have to, change that. You have to be willing to take a look at everything that you've been told, all your indoctrination, and then rework yourself to be able to see the truth the way, that in a reality-based situation. Not the truth that you want to see, but the truth the way it is. And for most people, that's, impossible. But hopefully in the future it won't be. Anyways, I got to wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting for the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.